A former merchandiser who had lost faith in people often wanted to erase his presence, cut all contact, and disappear, though he never understood these impulses. After winning the lottery, he quit his job, moved to a quiet town in Hokkaido, and began farming to escape his old life. He suddenly found himself in another world resembling an RPG and stared at the unfamiliar buildings, landscapes, and creatures in confusion. After overcoming his initial panic, he embraced his freedom and decided he would somehow survive here. Fortunately, his chicken coop and tool shed were transported with him. The eggs and edible plants he gathered ensured he would not starve. Expecting magic and skills, he tried different chants and poses until something finally worked. Using evaluation before eating a fruit revealed it was a potato fruit. The skill only gave detailed information about food, and he wondered what would happen if he boiled it with the magical herb Virginia. When he encountered a monster, he lured it into a prepared trap by running backward and shouting. After defeating it, his status increased from level 2 to level 3. Although the window no longer surprised him, level 3 still seemed weak. Evaluation identified the monster as a non-human creature found throughout Lancaster. Unsure whether it was a goblin or Lancaster was the region's name, he took its equipment and decided to use every available resource. At his workbench, he crushed a firestone and femtostone together to create an abrasive flame. Polishing the goblin dagger with it produced a fiery dagger. Realizing he could add properties to weapons, he decided to gather more resources. He also examined Irene's healing herbs, magical virgin herbs, and potato fruit. He brewed a potion that restored strength, healed moderate wounds, and replenished magic and energy. He then considered using the poisonous herbs batter and gadel to create a fast-acting poison potion. To test it, he drank the potion and ate marline as an antidote, but still collapsed. He realized anyone watching would think he was an idiot. The potion was powerful enough to coat arrowheads. While considering growing herbs, he suddenly realized the poison could also serve as bait. After feeding herbs to a chicken, evaluation showed it had become a grass chicken whose meat restored strength and removed toxins. He wondered whether tonic and medicinal herbs could interact. He butchered and roasted the enhanced chicken, finding it extremely delicious and declaring that its life had not been wasted. After burying the remains, he decided to visit town and sell his creations. Since he could not make everything himself, he needed money despite the 3-hour round trip. Exhausted from walking, he saw an old man leading a horse and decided to buy one. At the city gates, he claimed to be a merchant but could not understand the guard's response. He showed the guard his potions and herbs and was allowed inside. Since he only needed basic trade words and numbers, he saw no reason to learn the entire language. He accidentally joined the Adventurers Guild and examined its quest board and reward counter. The hero mainly caught long-toothed sea bass but could not understand whether a quest required submission or cooperation. After leaving the guild, he heard someone call him. A small merchant and a weapons dealer named Margot greeted him. When he showed them the fiery dagger, the dealer immediately offered to buy it, revealing the value of enchanted weapons. He sold the dagger despite the merchant's irritation because he could easily make another. When they asked whether he wanted to move into the city, he refused. Fearing his old urge to abandon everything, he preferred living alone and still struggled with relationships. Having earned enough gold for a horse, he used chalk to communicate and learned the local language was called Lancaster. Evaluation could translate Japanese writing into Lancaster, though slowly. The merchant's wife, Sarasa, offered to help him purchase a horse, so he waited for her return. Sarasa soon returned with a horse. He paid her, said goodbye to Margot and Lady Sarasa, and began his easier journey home. Margot and Sarasa followed him to his property. They quickly built a stable for the horse and even offered to construct a blacksmith shop, leaving him stunned. He had rejected city life and isolated himself out of fear, but Margot and Sarasa continued gently breaking through his emotional walls. Their relationship had already grown beyond business, though he refused to acknowledge it and still feared creating new bonds. He began making plans and decided he would properly thank Margot and Sarasa later. Once the construction was complete, the hero became a merchant farmer. His new horse, Renante, also enjoyed the stable. Following Margot and Sarasa's design, the farm now included a forge and stable alongside the chicken coop and tool shed. With enough space for production, the hero brewed virgin and murena into a potion. The potion restored magic and neutralized medium-level poison in small amounts. He kept part for himself and planned to sell the rest while considering whether to expand his production of attribute weapons. Unsure how to thank Margot and Sarasa, he decided to prepare a meal using fresh herbs, meat, and chicken. However, slaughtering more grass chickens would reduce his supply of restorative eggs. Although farming interested him more than hunting, he considered catching a rabbit. Instead, he found a wolf-like monster in one of his traps. After leveling up, he used appraise and learned it was a wolf monster found throughout Lancaster. He decided its meat could be used for dinner. Since he could not butcher the wolf himself, he took it to the guild's dismantling facility. While waiting, he noticed a quest to subdue a cockatrice. Guild Administrator Dan approached him and repeatedly mentioned Kai, apparently asking Keigo to follow him. Evaluation revealed they had arrived at a dojo. Its instructor, Kai, greeted Keigo Okuda, who hoped to learn combat skills for self-defense. Keigo thanked Kai and watched him destroy a dummy with one strike. Kai handed him a wooden sword. When Keigo copied the technique, the weapon glowed and shattered the dummy. Keigo acquired the strike skill. A translated sign explained that Kai offered beginners free training because too many adventurers died fighting monsters. Realizing he could learn skills beyond appraisal, Keigo collected ingredients for Margot and Sarasa and returned home. On the way, he saw a goblin turn to stone and then spotted the cockatrice. Recognizing the danger, he urged Renante to run faster. Keigo hid in the barn with a chicken, trembling and crying until someone knocked on the door. When he saw Sarasa outside, he hugged her and burst into tears from relief. Sarasa asked whether he had been frightened. Keigo tried to compose himself after noticing Margot and an unfamiliar adventurer nearby. Hearing Margot mention the cockatrice, Keigo realized they intended to subdue it and decided to rely on them. Though he did not fully understand the situation, Keigo contributed by providing his stored weapons and medicines. Sarissa showed him a drawn plan, explaining how they would subdue the cockatrice. Keigo realized they expected him to attack with a bow. As a former trading company employee, he had no desire to risk his life in this game-like world. Margot, Sarasa, and the adventurer assured Keigo that working together would be safer and promised to protect him. Keigo understood that hiding would accomplish nothing and that surviving alone was unlikely. He joined the mission while hoping to return alive. Seeing the enormous cockatrice, Keigo envied Sarasa for staying behind. After confirming Margot and the adventurer were ready, he aimed his bow. Keigo fired a poisoned arrow into the cockatrice, signaling the others to attack. During the battle, Keigo realized his allies were much stronger than him. The cockatrice then targeted him with an attack he could not dodge. The adventurer pushed Keigo aside, allowing them to avoid the worst of the attack. Keigo's body began turning to stone. After Margot shouted about the detoxification potion, he gave one to the adventurer and drank another himself. Margot pinned the cockatrice down. Keigo realized he and the adventurer could defeat it by attacking together with strike. Their combined blow killed the cockatrice. Keigo leveled up and was stunned that they had won. The adventurer introduced himself as Juno, and Keigo thanked him and Margot. Keigo realized their combined strength had brought victory, though he remained troubled by the destructive impulses hidden within him. To celebrate, Keigo prepared a feast for Margot, Sarasa, and Juno using meat seasoned with garlic and salt. He believed food could express his gratitude and thanked Juno for the battle and Margot and Sarasa for building the forge and stable. During the meal, 3 blue wolves approached, apparently attracted by the food. Keigo decided there was no reason to attack unless they became hostile. His companions ignored the wolves and continued eating. Keigo wanted to avoid unnecessary conflict, believing survival mattered more than defeating every possible enemy. After his guests returned to the city, Keigo cleaned up and prepared defenses in case the blue wolves approached his property again. Keigo dug pit traps, covered them with poisonous herbs, and waited for the blue wolves to return. He also installed a homemade rattle alarm around his territory. Keigo adjusted a tiger trap purchased from the guild, believing the defenses greatly improved his chances of survival. He placed a warning sign around the property, stored his tools, and decided to build a shield before renovating the hut. After using all his lumber, Keigo looked proudly at the small hut he had turned into his own home. For dinner, he cooked blue wolf steak with iron herbs and salt, accompanied by Milanese fruit liqueur. When the alarm sounded, Keigo grabbed his weapon and cautiously left the hut, hoping the visitors were human. He found a blue wolf trapped outside and killed it with an arrow before searching for the remaining 2. The The other wolves had disappeared, making Keigo suspect they were hiding nearby. The two wolves suddenly attacked him from opposite sides. Keigo stabbed one with his sword and knocked the other into a pit trap with his shield. Adrenaline suppressed his fear as he prepared to face the last wolf. Keigo activated Strike and killed it with one powerful blow. After leveling up, Keigo collapsed on the grass and realized how close he had come to death. His current strength was still insufficient. A rustling sound made him prepare for another fight, but he noticed something unexpected. A small puppy approached its dead mother, then happily began running around Keigo. Although the wolves had tried to kill him, only their puppy remained, now held in his arms. Unable to kill it, Keigo bowed to the mother and accepted responsibility for raising the pup. Exhausted, he returned to the hut and fell asleep while holding it. Sarasa immediately adored the puppy, but Keigo insisted it was not for sale. He asked Sarasa and Juno to help skin the wolves and learned through appraisal that their fangs could upgrade weapons. Keigo sold the remaining wolf materials. Appraisal revealed that the puppy was a rare ash wolf with unusual fur. Keigo hoped raising the wolf among humans would prevent it from attacking them, though he accepted responsibility for killing it if it ever became dangerous. He planned to make a cloak from ash wolf fur so the puppy would recognize his scent, then began considering a name. Keigo named him Ash, the first creature he could call family in this world. Ash immediately began chasing chickens and damaging seedlings. Keigo swore to take responsibility for raising him properly. After Ash returned covered in mud, Keigo worried about wasting water and began forging something from ingots Margot had left behind. He completed a heated bathtub, finally allowing him to bathe in warm water. With Renanta, he could also transport larger water supplies. Keigo traveled to a spacious lake for water and ignored the unfamiliar monsters nearby because they were not hostile. Ash suddenly sensed danger before an unseen attack knocked Keigo into the barrels despite his shield. Realizing an aquatic monster had attacked, Keigo watched Ash bite its back and fired a poisoned arrow into its knee. While the monster was distracted, Keigo beheaded it and leveled up, knowing Ash had made the victory possible. Appraisal identified the creature as a Murnam, a water monster capable of water magic. Ash brought him a Murnam scale containing water attribute power, convincing Keigo that the pup was now his true partner. Keigo played music for Ash and later bathed with him, appreciating the simple happiness they shared. Keigo wanted to grow stronger to protect Ash and worried that herbs, eggs, and purchase jerky were not enough for the wolf's development. After encountering a monster that used magic, Keigo realized he needed a stronger weapon but preferred avoiding unnecessary battles. Keigo chose to believe meeting Ash was fate and hoped they could live peacefully together. Although they could now take hot baths, Keigo remained uneasy. Wearing clothes bought in town reminded him that he truly lived in another world, but at least the water supply problem was solved. Keigo spent several days practicing with scrap iron before attempting to forge a weapon from valuable iron ingots and an ash wolf fang obtained by Juno. The finished weapon was identified through appraisal as the Wolverine sword, a precious iron blade reinforced with an ash wolf fang. Keigo believed the Wolverine sword could protect Ash. He crushed a Murnam scale and firestone together, then tasted the powder to activate appraisal. Appraisal identified it as Thunder Demon Powder, capable of adding lightning to weapons. Keigo polished the Wolverine sword with it. The weapon became Wolverine's Thunder Sword, forged from precious iron, reinforced with an ash wolf fang and imbued with lightning. Keigo wrapped the hilt with insulation, but Ash had already fallen asleep. Keigo decided to improve his defense and archery before learning magic. Since poison ingredients were limited, he sought training from Master Kaya. Kaya allowed Keigo to keep the bow and demonstrated a glowing arrow attack on a dummy. Keigo copied the technique and acquired Charged Arrow, though he knew it required more practice. Kai then taught defense. Keigo attacked his steel-like guard before activating toughness against the counterattack. The blow knocked Keigo down, but he successfully acquired toughness. He thanked Kai and left determined to keep training. Sarasa gave Keigo the cloak he had ordered. Seeing it as a reminder of Ash's parents, he promised to protect it. Sarasa also pointed out that his barrel-lid shield was useless, so Keigo bought a proper replacement from her. Ash jumped from Sarasa's arms into Keigo's, and they returned home together. Keigo used Murnam scale dust to enchant the cloak. Appraisal identified it as Ash Wolf Cloak Fire Resistance. Realizing water enchantment provided fire resistance, Keigo decided to enchant his shield as well and grow stronger to protect Ash. During daily archery practice, Ash alerted Keigo to a group of approaching people. Keigo recognized the irritated Margot and Juno among them. The group was led by an aristocrat on horseback. Later, Keigo placed a flower on a grave and prayed, relieved that none of his loved ones had died. Earlier, Keigo had refused to accompany the aristocrat into a forest dungeon, arguing that he was only an ordinary villager. Margot made it clear they could not refuse. The nobleman was named Bayerun. Keigo expected to provide potions and planned to gather new herbs, but the expedition soon felt strangely staged. Magic-using dog monsters killed several mercenaries while Bayerun and his retinue remained safely behind and only gave orders. Keigo protected some mercenaries with his shield, disgusted by the same inequality he had hated in his previous world. Keigo activated toughness, blocked the monsters, and ordered the surviving mercenaries to escape when their movements slowed. After killing one monster and leveling up, assessment identified it as a hellhound that breathed fire but became vulnerable afterward. Margot called the expedition suicide as Bayerun angrily caught up. Bayerun accepted part of their earnings as compensation and left. Keigo realized aristocrats could be as dangerous as monsters. Standing before the mercenaries' graves, Keigo saw how few people cared about their deaths and briefly reconsidered moving into the city. However, aristocrats could threaten him anywhere, so Keigo chose peace over false safety. Margot apologized and offered him gold. Keigo refused the gold and left to be alone with Ash. On the way home, he ate gathered herbs for energy but became completely paralyzed. Keigo awoke at an inn with Ash beside him and Juno, Margot, and Sarasa nearby. Sarasa explained that he had eaten poisonous herbs, so Keigo apologized for causing trouble. He had slept for 6 hours while they cared for Ash and Renante. Keigo thanked them and realized how kind they were. Keigo returned home considering avoiding the forest, though he knew another confrontation with its enraged monsters was inevitable. Appraisal identified the plant as green anesthetic herb, a powerful anesthetic with no antidote. Keigo used an anesthetic potion on prey and waited for the poison to clear before butchering it. He then attracted a goblin and practiced defense by repeatedly using fortress and drinking recovery potions until the monster weakened. The goblin eventually fled and Keigo let it go because he never pursued retreating enemies. Pleased with his improved defense, he relaxed beside the sleeping Ash. Keigo finished several fire daggers and prepared dried venison for sale. To thank Ash, he decided to take him into town. Keigo sold the fire daggers to Margot and explained that the other goods were intended for Sarasa. Margot offered to buy everything wholesale, including the alcohol Keigo had brought, and he accepted. Margot then closed the shop and invited Sarasa and Juno to spend the day with them. Sarasa brought chicken, and Keigo prepared grilled meat and vegetable skewers for everyone. Despite the dangers of this world, Keigo felt safe eating with his friends and Ash. He admired the star-filled sky, unobstructed by skyscrapers. The next morning, Keigo and Ash collected water for their bath before heading home. Ash suddenly growled toward a nearby rock, where a mernom faced an enormous snake. Realizing the mernom looked tiny beside the monster, Keigo silenced Ash and began packing to escape. The snake spat poisonous liquid that burned through the mernom's scales. Keigo immediately fled in the cart, abandoning the bathwater. Back inside his hut, Keigo hid in the hay and cried in fear, unsure what to do. Knowing an ordinary farmer could not defeat such a monster, Keigo went to the guild and drew the snake to ask for help. He hoped experienced adventurers could kill it. The guild posted a snake subjugation quest worth 5 gold coins. Keigo refused to risk his life against an enemy he could not handle alone. Several days later, an experienced group accepted the quest and even recovered his missing bathtub. Keigo decided to rely on the guild against major threats. While unloading the bathtub near the pond, he noticed Ash behaving strangely. Ash ran forward as a mernom emerged from the water. Keigo fired an anesthetic arrow into its shoulder. Once the monster collapsed, Keigo beheaded it and noticed its body resembled a fish before beginning to skin it. Mernoms were valuable potion ingredients, so Keigo learned how to butcher them properly. He also collected more scales and considered creating a water-enchanted dagger. Appraisal revealed that the new dagger produced clean water from its tip, making it useful for filling containers. Keigo planned to make more water daggers for irrigation, livestock, personal use, and sale. He roasted the mernom meat and found it tasted like white fish. Although the pond contained many promising ingredients, he avoided exploring because it was snake territory. Needing money for future guild requests, Keigo took 4 water daggers to town. Margot and Sarasa immediately argued over who would buy them. Ash's barking ended the dispute, apparently in Margot's favor. Keigo then noticed Juno standing nearby with a troubled expression. Keigo promises Ash he will return after finishing his business. Remembering his difficulty communicating with foreigners in his previous job, he realizes he still hesitates to approach people. However, Keigo has formed relationships despite barely knowing the local language and feels satisfied with his current companions. Appraisal reveals that Hellhound claws can enchant equipment with fire effects and resistance. Keigo uses them to create a Hellfire sword and a fire-resistant fist shield. Keigo reinforces the shield and tests the sword, releasing a small firestorm that destroys a chair. Ash then alerts him that prey has entered a trap. Keigo prepares the trapped rabbit for smoking and cooks the venison and boar. With the bathtub nearly full, he enjoys a warm bath and meal. Sharing venison with Ash, Keigo feels close to achieving the peaceful farming life he wanted. His thoughts are interrupted when Margot and Juno arrive. Realizing Juno is leaving to hunt stronger monsters, Keigo gives him several potions. Margot stays behind, uses Keigo's bath, and gives him a collection of valuable ingredients. Margot accompanies Keigo while he gathers herbs and points out unfamiliar monsters, ordering him to shoot. They defeat a cobalt warrior and a gray bear, causing Keigo to grow stronger. After returning, Margot immediately uses the bath again. Margot takes the valuable monster materials to town for butchering. Keigo realizes his new friendships feel warmer and more genuine than the relationships from his previous life. Keigo studies an oil lamp powered by a monster core while Ash sleeps beside him. He begins compiling his own encyclopedia of Lancaster's monsters, materials, and discoveries, knowing the current peace may not last. During another fight, Keigo blocks a Murnum with toughness, but Hellfire Roar and ordinary strikes barely affect the water monster. Keigo kills it with strike and concludes that elemental compatibility matters. Water penetrates fire resistance, while fire is ineffective against water creatures. He continues hunting Murnums to study these rules and gather scales and meat. While loading his cart, Keigo notices the serpent approaching and immediately flees. Ash barks at the monster throughout their escape until Keigo calls him back and locks them inside the hut. Keigo realizes his victories over the Murnums made him careless about the far more dangerous serpent. He spends the night praying it will not find his home. At the Adventurers Guild, Keigo increases the reward for killing the serpent and considers adding more traps around his property. Keigo mixes Jubble Venom with a Cicatrix Venom gland. He tests the poison and immediately drinks an antidote but still collapses as Ash barks in panic. After taking another antidote, Appraisal identifies the mixture as Donner, a poison capable of killing him with a single drop. Keigo apologizes to Ash for frightening him. Keigo spreads the poison through his traps and hopes it will repel the serpent. After a sleepless night, Ash suddenly begins barking. Keigo grabs his weapon and investigates. Keigo sees the serpent near his home and freezes, believing escape may be impossible. A group of adventurers suddenly appears between Keigo and the serpent and attacks it. Keigo remains paralyzed by fear while Ash stays beside him. Realizing he cannot help, Keigo holds Ash and leaves the battle to the adventurers. The serpent then prepares a powerful poisonous attack. A frontline fighter blocks the poison with his shield and calls for support from 2 female mages. The mages combine their power into a fiery tornado that burns the serpent to ashes. Keigo thanks the adventurers and recognizes that their coordinated teamwork gave them strength he still lacks. After finally sleeping, Keigo surveys the ruined area and realizes his defenses would have been useless against the serpent. Despite everything, he and Ash survived. Margot and Juno arrive from the city and hug Keigo in relief after confirming he is unharmed. Margot relaxes in the bath while Keigo shares a drink with Juno. Although they disturb his solitude, their presence now feels comforting. Ash is a rare level 2 ash wolf with extremely slow growth. Named by Keigo, he follows his master everywhere and sleeps safely at his feet. Ash loved the meat Keigo gave him. Rosiantha preferred grass while the chicken ate worms, but Keigo forbade Ash from feeding her, so he obeyed. Ash accompanied Keigo everywhere. When a monster attacked, he barked to frighten it away and was overjoyed when his master praised him. When an older man and a young woman argued over Keigo, Ash tried to stop them. Instead, the woman grabbed and hugged him so tightly that he begged to be released. Ash loved singing with Keigo in the bathtub and chasing anything he threw, especially bones. Ash enjoyed being praised for returning the bone, but thought Keigo was foolish when he slept while Ash's water bowl was empty. He barked and jumped beside the bed to wake him. The room became dangerously hot, but Keigo would not wake up. Sensing a large creature hiding in the darkness, Ash stood his ground, determined to protect Keigo and Rosienta. Keigo was the kindest person in the world. Ash, the Ash Wolf, would always remain his loyal companion and protector. That day, Okuda was accompanied and protected by two men, Margot and Juno, both skilled in combat. They were with Ash, his faithful dog, gathering medicinal herbs deep in the forest. If Okuda had been alone in the forest, he wouldn't have dared to venture so far. He felt a tremendous sense of relief at not being alone and having comrades he could trust nearby. Margot reported that their target was in that location and that they should continue moving. Soon after, they engaged the monster and successfully destroyed it without suffering any serious losses. He noted that the battle had not been as difficult as he expected, and victory had come easily. Margot, one of the fighters, noticed an enemy appearing behind him and alerted the others. Before he could dodge, Okuda was struck by a surprise attack that caught him off guard. Almost immediately after, new giant monsters, larger than the previous one, burst onto the battlefield. Seeing a particularly dangerous creature among them, he expressed extreme surprise that a cockatrice was in the area. He mentally noted that the group had changed its formation to better deal with the threat. This time, he was to take the forward position with a shield and hold back the enemy's onslaught. When he noticed the cockatrice's eyes begin to glow, he realized it was about to use its petrification ability. He activated his defensive ability, Fortress, to withstand the oncoming attack. Okuda noticed his arm was starting to go numb. He mentally reminded himself to remain calm and take the potion, as he had done in similar situations. Margot reacted promptly and handed him the potion, which helped restore his condition. He accepted it and expressed gratitude for the timely assistance. Ash, standing nearby, barked as if to bolster morale and instill confidence. He praised the dog and gave the signal to begin the counterattack. Margot and Juno, acting in unison, supported him in the attack. They dealt a powerful combined blow to the enemy, demonstrating excellent teamwork. After the battle, the system notified that the character's level had increased from 12 to 13. The changes also affected stats. Health increased from 26 to 28, magical energy from 16 to 27, vitality from 19 to 21, strength from 25 to 27, intelligence from 76 to 77, agility from 31 to 33, and speed from 25 to 27. Okuda felt that he was stronger than he was before and realized that he had made significant progress. However, he also realized that the most important thing is not only strength, but also reliable comrades who are nearby. The group completed the mission and returned safely to the city without losing a single member. Sarasa, a woman in their entourage, was the first to approach Okuda. He recalled the last time he saw her before the tragic snake attack on his home. He noted that despite everything he had been through, he was fine. Inside, he felt a certain satisfaction that was difficult to express in words. The idea of living a life immersed in the routine of ordinary days seemed quite appealing to him. However, since arriving in this world, every day has been different from the last and brought new challenges. In the past, he worked for a company and was completely absorbed in work activities. After parting with his colleagues, he felt an uneasy silence and a void of loneliness. He thought his former comrades were probably now having fun and living life to the fullest. Despite his selfish thoughts, he admitted to himself that he enjoyed a calm and measured life. His deepest desire was to be truly free. Many believed that even experienced adventurers couldn't always defeat a foe like a serpent. He admitted that if a dragon had attacked him, it would likely have resulted in his death. For this reason, he was determined to become stronger and survive, no matter the circumstances. Possessing magic seemed like a great way to improve his chances of survival. He joked that he'd already possessed powerful magic all along, though in fact this wasn't true. Life, in his view, wasn't easy and didn't forgive mistakes. Only recently did he realize that he had exceptional abilities in alchemy and blacksmithing. No one else could create potions and weapons as effective as he did. Even Margot, with his extensive artisanal experience, couldn't recreate his creations. Although he didn't master fire magic, he could achieve the same effect with a flaming sword. And although he couldn't heal with magic, he could create potions that restored health and removed negative conditions. This result was made possible by his special skill of appraisal. He admitted to himself that he had previously greatly underestimated the importance of this skill. When he decided to focus on alchemy and blacksmithing, he realized that this could be his path to success. No matter which path he chose, it would all ultimately come down to hard work. Reflecting on this, he gradually drifted off to sleep. When he woke up, he remembered that he had another weapon, a bow. Later, he went to practice to hone his bow skills. During the session, he thanked his mentor, Master Kai, for his support and teaching. Kai, in response to this, gave the command to pierce and demonstrated a shot from a bow. Okuda concluded that the skill increased the penetrating power of arrows, amplifying their impact. He concluded that such an ability would be especially useful against monsters immune to magic. Despite his newfound power, he knew there were still hidden and dangerous creatures in this world. If he let his guard down, he could very well pay with his life. Kai turned to Okuda, indicating that it was now his turn to fire. Okuda calmly confirmed that it was his turn and focused. He took a firm stance, braced himself for the shot, mentally braced himself, and gave himself the mental command to pierce the target. His thoughts at that moment revolved around a strategic choice. Instead of risking his life in close combat with a sword, it was far wiser and safer to develop archery skills that allowed him to maintain his distance. Mastering magic from scratch would be significantly longer and more difficult, meaning archery represented a more promising path to survival. He concluded that right now, archery training was the most important thing to dedicate his full effort to. Suddenly, the system confirmed his success. Keigo Okuda had mastered a new combat skill called the piercing shot. Despite this, he was well aware that hitting a target on the first try was practically impossible, so he calmly accepted the result. He expressed his gratitude for the experience and prepared to leave. He then approached Dan to express his desire to submit a formal request for subordination. It occurred to him that such requests were quite commonplace. He usually does this when he notices particularly strong monsters near his home. Inspecting his old bow, he noted how worn it was and how much it had lost its former strength. He went to a gun shop. Okuda felt a sense of relief at the realization that he'd managed to obtain a new bow. But then he noticed Margot walking toward him with a smile on her face, and he tried to figure out what exactly he was trying to convey. Okuda felt a sense of unease and silently pleaded with Margot not to act rashly. He believed it was unwise to close the store in broad daylight, as drinking alcohol every day was unwise. He discreetly but persistently asked him to abandon the idea. He noted to himself that Margot possessed a rare carefree nature, unlike most of the people around her. He soon completed the complex process of creating a special substance, petrifying sand, by waiting for the cockatrice's eye to dry completely. He breathed a sigh of relief, noting that he had finally completed this painstaking work. The system reported that a new weapon had been created, a petrifying arrow. This arrow possessed a special attribute that allowed the target it struck to turn to stone. Okuda remembered that he already knew how to create poison and paralyzing arrows, but concluded that he needed to store them separately from his hunting arrows to prevent accidental use. At that moment, Ash, his dog, barked loudly, getting his attention. Okuda became wary, trying to figure out what was causing the disturbance. He froze immediately upon noticing the approaching nobles and felt a surge of tension within him. Baron approached and, leaving no choice, announced that Okuda must go with them. Okuda's thoughts began to race, trying to figure out if they were really demanding that he go with them. He bowed politely and expressed regret, demonstrating his willingness to respect the chain of command. However, he noted that he still wasn't satisfied. Then he silently handed them a coin to complete the transaction. After that, the nobles left without a word. Okuda exhaled deeply and noted to himself that the situation had been dangerous, but he'd managed to escape unscathed. He was also relieved that this time neither Margot nor Juno were around. He didn't want them to witness such a conflict. Looking back at the retreating adventurers, he felt a pang of pity for them as they looked exhausted and joyless. He wished them safe return, but quickly pushed the sympathy aside, reminding himself that they had nothing to do with him. He noted with satisfaction that he had managed to replenish his supplies. However, he still had to evaluate the herbs he had gathered in the forest. Although he had no particular desire to test for poisonous plants, he knew he had to do it. At that moment, his attention was again drawn by the noise coming from outside. He looked out and noticed that the nobles had reappeared at his home. Okuda still didn't fully understand what exactly was happening, but his gaze froze when he saw the consequences. The petrification had spread over a large area. In a panic, he began searching for a Paruna potion and, fortunately, quickly found it. Assessing the situation, he concluded that the people had been harmed by a cockatrice attack. Okuda saw many wounded, but to his relief, none of them were killed. He realized the adventurers had failed again and were unable to reach the dungeon. He stood among the wounded, barely containing his irritation. He didn't want to say it out loud in front of the injured, but he was outraged that they had once again caused chaos on his property. The thought was running through his mind that his barn was not meant to serve as a field hospital. He clearly realized that the nobleman was the real culprit and must be held accountable. Okuda promised himself that next time he would definitely exact compensation from him. His irritation grew, and in his thoughts he called the nobleman stupid. Nevertheless, he didn't abandon the victims. He offered refreshments, and the grateful adventurers expressed their appreciation. The nobleman continued to urge them on, showing impatience. Inwardly, Okuda prayed they would never return. When all the commotion finally ended, he wondered what could have happened to the nobleman's horse. Then he breathed a sigh of relief, realizing he was finally alone and could go about his business in peace. Byron was the name of a nobleman, descended from a distinguished and respected family that had lived in the city of Leicester for many generations. This family's lineage had a long, rich, and illustrious history, known to almost every resident. There was not a single person on the streets of Leicester who had not heard of the famous name of Byron, so deeply rooted was it in the public consciousness. The situation in the city had recently become alarming, as attacks by monsters had become more frequent. He attributed the increased activity to the dungeon located in the nearby forest being overrun with dangerous creatures. This, he believed, was the reason for the sharp increase in the number of monsters in the city's vicinity. Realizing that his background obliged him to act, Byron felt the weight of responsibility. He firmly believed that a nobleman's duty was to protect his hometown, maintain order, and demonstrate personal courage. To this end, he personally assembled a group of adventurers to journey into the forest dungeon and clear it of threats. However, to his great disappointment, the expedition failed to yield the expected results and effectively failed before it even began. His companions were completely unprepared for battle and proved utterly helpless. As soon as they encountered a common cockatrice, not the strongest but still a dangerous monster, these so-called adventurers scattered in panic. They fortunately returned Melty, a horse he held especially dear and who had been his faithful companion, completely unharmed. This was done to avoid the risk of her being harmed or killed in encounters with monsters. After an unsuccessful campaign, Baron returned to his chambers and felt a profound sadness suddenly and completely overwhelm him. For 3 days and 3 nights, his pillow was wet with tears, a testimony to his emotional pain. In his thoughts, he addressed his beloved, asking her to wait for him. He promised himself that he would restore her to her former appearance, no matter the path or how many gold coins it took. Baron firmly believed that his subordinates were obligated to work tirelessly, striving to enhance their master's honor. He considered neglecting this sacred duty a misdemeanor deserving severe punishment. The men he had chosen as his companions had not only failed him, but also dishonored his good name, and then tried to justify themselves. Therefore, he unhesitatingly ordered their detention for 1 week, considering this part of his duties dictated by his noble birth. Baron also believed that it was the nobleman's responsibility to personally administer justice to those who had failed him. He warned that before upsetting him, one should carefully consider one's actions. Outside the city, there lived a strange man who led a reclusive life and stood out from the crowd. This man, as Byron noted, was well aware of his place in society. Moreover, when he saw that Byron had been petrified, he immediately rushed to his aid and managed to heal him. Unlike all the others, this man proved not just reliable, but truly helpful. In addition, the meat dish that the man called kunse turned out to be the most delicious dish Byron had ever tasted. He was so impressed that he firmly resolved that next time he would make this man his loyal subordinate and accompany him to the dungeon. He intended to do all this for the sake of his honor, because he considered himself a hero of this land, whose name should spread far and wide. In his mind, he anticipated the battle with the monsters, declaring that he was going after them. His loud laughter, filled with determination and inner fire, filled the air, and the passionate name Melty flew from his lips. One of the guild workers was named Dan, and he had been extremely busy in recent days. More and more dangerous creatures began appearing around the city, cockatrices, snakes, and other monsters posing a serious security threat. Dan believed this situation was directly related to the fact that the nearby dungeon had become overcrowded. He was convinced that without decisive action, the consequences would be devastating for both the city's residents and the surrounding areas. The first warning signs had already appeared. The economy had begun to noticeably weaken and decline. In response to the growing threat, the guild began actively supporting adventurers called upon to exterminate monsters and protect civilians. These brave individuals, risking their own lives daily, saved the lives of others. However, Dan soberly realized that no one would engage in such heroism for free. He understood that only a fool would agree to such risks without adequate compensation. Despite his desire to reward brave men adequately, his resources were limited. Both the guild's resources and the money coming from customers were too modest. He emphasized that another key element in the whole problem was a local nobleman in a position of power. This man turned out to be Baron, and in Dan's opinion, he was excessively stingy. Even in times of extreme danger, when the city's defenders should have been supported, Baron continued to cut the guild's budget. Dan was sure that if the rewards for completing quests were higher, it would attract stronger adventurers willing to engage in battle with monsters. Victory over the monsters would lead to the restoration of normal economic activity. This, in turn, would allow for the improvement of the tax system. But as Dan noted, the nobleman Baron was incapable of comprehending even such basic things, and his behavior seemed utterly absurd. He became a constant source of headache for everyone around him. Trying to find a way out of the situation, Dan turned to the guild master for advice. However, the amount of reward they could offer the adventurers was negligible and insufficient to the scale of the threat. Against this backdrop, a mysterious man named Keigo appeared. Okuda, despite being an adventurer himself, he acted completely differently. He created orders himself and offered astonishingly large sums for them. Although his missions involved very powerful and dangerous monsters, the rewards he offered completely outweighed the risk. Dan felt genuine gratitude towards this man. He felt Keigo was closely connected to Margot, Juno, and Sarasa, as he often saw them together. Besides his adventurer activities, Dan believed Keigo also made money by selling various items, although this remained purely speculative. He didn't attach much importance to the source of his income, considering only one thing important. Keigo paid the guild generously and regularly for placing orders. Dan concluded that he must closely monitor the actions of this unusual man and value his support. After the incident with that arrogant nobleman, Okuda reunited with his comrades with whom he'd shared many trials and moments. After they confirmed he was completely fine and untouched by any misfortunes, they all decided it was time to celebrate, to relieve tension and rediscover the joy of life. He was particularly surprised by the behavior of Sarasa, who, as it turned out, was not at all averse to drinking and did so quite confidently, demonstrating not only the ability to endure, but also to enjoy the process. Amidst the merriment and laughter, his comrades asked him to recount what had happened between him and the nobleman and how it had all been resolved. Okuda, trying to explain himself as best he could, recounted how he had given him the money and, as best he could, asked him not to bother him again, not to interfere in his life, and to leave him alone. He explained himself using a heavily distorted local language, as he wasn't fluent, and resorted to copious gesticulation, hoping that facial expressions and gestures would help convey the meaning of his words. However, he himself wasn't sure how fully and accurately those around him understood him. However, he noted with confidence that they liked the story because it was clear from their faces, laughter, and reactions that the story evoked a lively response. This night, usually filled with peace and quiet, unexpectedly turned out to be noisy, cheerful, and eventful, which, as he realized, was not something bad for him and even seemed refreshing. Realizing that nothing could be changed and the day was over, Okuda wished everyone good night, internally making peace with the past. The next morning, when the first rays of the sun began to penetrate through the window, he, with slight embarrassment, offered his comrades water and warned them to be careful, remembering yesterday's libations. After everyone left, he noted that he'd drunk quite a bit, but despite this, he felt surprisingly energetic. It occurred to him that his body had previously been less able to handle alcohol, but now, perhaps thanks to his experience with the appraisal skill and frequent experimentation with various poisons, he had increased his resistance to its negative effects. He suddenly remembered the herb he'd recently found in the forest and realized he'd never properly assessed it. Judging by its appearance and past experience, he expected nothing good from it and anticipated some unpleasant effects. Nevertheless, he decided to try a small experiment. Carefully licking the leaf, he realized with surprise that he felt no numbness, pain, or other strange sensations. The taste was refreshing and reminiscent of mint, which was quite unexpected. A tingle of unease stirred within him, and for a moment he wondered if he had gone mad, but then, with an effort of will, he calmed himself and applied his appraisal skill. The system worked as smoothly and reliably as always, informing him that the discovered element was marble grass, an edible plant ideal for drying and brewing tea. This discovery delighted him. He realized he had found not poison, but a valuable natural ingredient. Deciding that next time he would definitely treat Sarasa to the aromatic drink, he noted that now he needed to dry the leaves properly. At that moment, he heard the sound of rain. It was the first rain he'd seen since arriving in this world. Not wanting to waste time, he headed to the forge, intending to continue working until the rain subsided. Later, the system returned a result, a new weapon called the Hellfire Arrow with a medium-strength flame. Seeing this, Okuda was genuinely pleased, as he had successfully completed the creation of an elemental weapon. He was glad that he had previously imbued his quiver with the water element. This gave him an intriguing idea. If he could imbue the element into the quiver, then using the appraisal skill, he could learn to enchant items. And so he did. The system reported that a water element plate had been created, an iron plate imbued with the element of water, causing moisture to form on its surface. He realized he could now enchant not only weapons but also armor and household items. To increase the plate's size, he needed scales, which he planned to obtain later. Judging by the results, the plate collected water more efficiently than water blades, and this discovery inspired him. He began to consider how he could apply this ability to everyday life. For example, he could create a mug that would produce its own water, a frying pan that would emit fire, a broom that could attract dust, or even a rope that could petrify. All of these ideas could be useful and in demand since no one had ever done anything like this before. But despite his potential, he reminded himself of his true purpose, to live in solitude and peace, far from the bustle of humanity. If he showed too much of himself, he might once again fall into that nobleman's sights, and he certainly didn't want that. So he returned to work. He soon noticed Ash, his dog, covered in mud. Apparently, the dog was enjoying the rain, which brought a slight smile to Okuda's face. The dog barked joyfully, responding to his words. He took a breath of fresh air and felt a surge of energy. After several days, the rain finally stopped. The pleasant scent of damp earth filled the air. The bright blue sky with slowly drifting clouds and the soft warmth of the sun created a feeling of peace. He had already managed to feed all the animals and water the garden, and now, in the peace and quiet, he began to feel sleepy. Suddenly, an approaching carriage caught his attention, causing him to feel a sense of tension. He sensed the situation was unraveling. Okuda silently hoped it was just a fluke. However, soon Margit's voice rang out, calling his name and Baron's. The name Baron stirred memories in him, though he couldn't quite place it. He pulled out his writing board to try and start a conversation. It turned out that the guild master had chosen a squad consisting of Margot, Juno, Kai, and himself to accompany that very nobleman. This news did not please him. He began to wonder why the nobleman was so eager to conquer the dungeon. Perhaps the overcrowding of the dungeons was causing monsters to appear on the surface, and a cleansing was truly necessary. It would also be beneficial to Okuda himself, as it would make his home safer. However, he distrusted Byron, whom he considered a man lacking both experience and understanding of the necessary forces, yet who tried to command and impose his decisions. Simply put, he considered him incompetent. He wanted to avoid participating in the expedition with all his might, but perhaps with the support of the city's strongest warriors, it would be less dangerous. He wanted the dungeon clearing to be successful. He decided to begin preparations, for the day had finally arrived. Looking at the guild master, he noted that he looked confident and calm. Guild Master Shiraku thanked the group of adventurers for their participation in the recent operation. Okuda, realizing he didn't have the same combat prowess as the others, decided to join the support squad, which consisted of healers and those providing logistical support. At that moment, Sarasa approached him. She silently handed him the bracelet, which surprised him. Realizing it wasn't just jewelry, he activated his appraisal skill. The system immediately returned a result, a poison-resistant bracelet, granting the wearer the ability to resist poisoning. This astonished Okuda. Such things were expensive. He sincerely thanked Sarasu, promising to treasure her gift. Then he noticed Kai's strange gaze. It wasn't hostile, but there was tension and a certain determination in it. Okuda thought the time had come. He tried to reassure himself that their group had many strong people, and if they kept their cool, even such a dangerous opponent as a snake could be defeated. However, they did not encounter a single monster on the way, which caused alarm. It meant that all the creatures had gathered directly in the dungeon. When they reached the entrance, Baron gave the order to begin the attack. The adventurers rushed into battle. Okuda watched with admiration as his comrades worked together in unison. The guild master, Kai, and the other warriors all acted with honed strength. As a support worker, he distributed potions to the injured. At some point, he realized that the healer's role was no less important, and if things continued this way, he himself would become a full-fledged healer. But soon his potions and herbs ran out. The monsters still surrounded them, and the fighter's strength was waning. He looked with alarm at the argument between the squad members and Byron, mentally pleading for it to stop and give the order to retreat. Fortunately, he still decided to retreat. The capture of the dungeon failed again, despite the participation of the city's strongest fighters. This meant only one thing: next time they would face even more powerful enemies. Okuda realized that he needed to become stronger. When he returned home, he found Sarasa setting the table. Apparently, she'd prepared everything in advance, pouring her heart into the food. He thanked her, genuinely touched by her concern. Okuda reflected that despite the language barrier, they were beginning to understand each other better through actions and gestures. Later the potion was ready, but he felt tired and allowed himself to rest. The night passed peacefully, and in the morning he was surprised to realize that he hadn't felt so relaxed around people in a long time. It was an unusual but pleasant change. Soon he heard a knock on the door. It turned out to be Shiraku. The guild master handed him the sacks. They were heavy and, as it turned out, filled with gold coins. There was also a letter inside. Okuda used his appraisal skill to decipher its contents. It was a message of gratitude and compensation for the unused potions. His surprise was boundless, but he understood the gist. His efforts were recognized. Then Shiraku mentioned Margot and Juno, and Okuda guessed he should hand the heavy bags over to them. He noted that Shiraku looked tired and aged, perhaps from his interactions with that nobleman. Turning to his sleeping comrades, he called them to breakfast, deciding that a cup of tea would be a worthy start to the day. Everyone thanked him for the treat. Shiraku finished his tea and said goodbye. Okuda thought he must be very busy to leave immediately. He said goodbye, thanking him for his visit. Hope was growing inside him. Perhaps the important truth would finally reach that very nobleman. Even such a strong team could not cope with the dungeon. Perhaps peace would reign in the area for a while. They hadn't even had time to rest properly. Okuda wondered if they should throw a consolation party to restore the group's spirit and cohesion. Okuda felt a sense of joy as he watched his guests, Juno and Margit, devour the beef shashlik he'd prepared with obvious relish. He sensed they were both beginning to tire, which he considered a fortunate development, as it could signal the evening was drawing to a close. At this point, he had already finished preparing the soup, hoping that it would help everyone regain their strength after a busy day. He noted to himself that the herb had indeed proven effective against his hangover and had noticeably eased his general condition. Margit, looking at the pot of soup, recognized the dish and remarked that it appeared to be shimno soup. Okuda confirmed his guess without a shadow of a doubt, confidently and succinctly letting him know he was right. A thought flashed through his mind. Just like before, everyone ate with great appetite, not hiding their pleasure. At the end of the evening, he wished everyone good night and noted that they would definitely see each other tomorrow. The next morning, his first thought was relief that the soup had actually worked and helped everyone recover. Since he had business at the guild, he suggested they go to town, and they went there together. On the way, Okuda reflected on his own desires and admitted to himself that he truly wanted to master magic. He recalled a time in the past when a sorceress used a tornado spell to defeat a giant serpent. He clearly realized it was wind magic, the very element that had always drawn him. He concluded that mastering magic requires painstaking practice and persistent training. He compared it to any other skill. Once you master the basics, you can develop mastery over time, albeit slowly but surely. As they parted, Margot expressed a desire to see him again, bidding him farewell. Okuda returned the favor, doing so lightly and with a slight smile. Upon entering the guild building, he immediately made a request, specifying that he wanted to study wind magic specifically. Dan, standing at the entrance, agreed and nodded, confirming the possibility. Okuda was surprised to see a dojo open before him, a place he didn't necessarily associate with magic training. He thought Master Kai hardly possessed magical abilities despite the atmosphere within. Dan knocked on the door, addressing a man named Han, asking him to take over the training. Okuda felt a slight thrill when he heard the teacher's name. He was surprised to see that Han, a noble-looking man with an artificial eye, was the very one who would be teaching him. Han turned out to be an instructor specializing in dark magic. Despite this, Okuda, with complete seriousness and respect, expressed his desire to learn from him. He wondered how many battles and hardships this man must have endured. Han demonstrated the power of wind magic, and Okuda felt a sense of admiration. It was truly impressive. Although he himself had no experience, he felt he wanted to follow this path. He decided to start with something simple, imagining the desired image in his mind, visualizing the air gathering into a spiral, turning into a typhoon. Concentrating, he repeated the words of the spell silently, directing the magical power toward the image of the wind. After considerable effort and hours of practice, he succeeded in activating the magic. The result, however, was weak, clearly insufficient to be considered significant. Nevertheless, the system notified him of his successful mastery of magic and the discovery of a new skill called wind. Okuda made a firm decision to continue training and become stronger. He also reminded himself that one day he would be able to brew his own potions to help maintain his strength. He promised himself to dedicate himself entirely to his training. During one training session, he playfully turned to his faithful dog, Ash, noticing that he seemed to be enjoying the airflow created by the spell. Suddenly, he noticed someone caught in the trap. It turned out to be a blue wolf. Ash reacted in time, preventing his owner from harming the animal. Okuda realized the wolf was Ash's own species and showed no aggression. He realized that the animal was not dangerous and let it go, saying that it could rest easy, but it would be better for it not to come back. Later that evening, while thinking about wind magic, he came to an unexpected conclusion. With its help, one can, for example, quickly dry hair. He asked Ash with a smile if he liked the feeling. Then his gaze fell on the bracelet on his wrist, and he remembered he had never thanked Sarasa for the gift. He thought he'd call Juno over so they could choose a gift in return. He remembered that Juno had lived in the tavern where he'd once received help. Since he'd been there before, finding his way wasn't difficult. Okuda walked down to the bar on the first floor of the tavern and headed towards the counter. At that moment, a man, barely able to utter a few words to the girl, hurried away. Okuda wondered if he had become an unintentional nuisance. The girl greeted him warmly. He explained that he was Juno's friend and asked which room he was in. The girl replied that Juno lived in room number 202. Okuda, relieved to be understood, headed up to the second floor. Reaching the right door, he knocked and, hearing no answer, said he was coming in. The door opened, revealing Juno. He looked tired and weak. Okuda offered to wash him, showing him how best to do it. Juno nodded silently in response. Okuda realized Juno must have been through a lot and decided not to bother him with unnecessary questions. He turned his attention back to the bracelet and, so as not to overwhelm Juno with conversation, began writing on the board. He suggested choosing a gift for Sarasa as a token of his gratitude. Juno read the proposal and agreed. As they stepped outside, Okuda felt a surge of concern for him. He admitted he hadn't understood Juno's words, but his feelings were clear to him. He remembered his own difficult moments when he had a friend there to simply listen. Okuda came to the conclusion that sometimes people don't need advice, they just need someone to confirm that their feelings are real. He felt that Juno had been through a lot. Even if he couldn't put it into words, he clearly sensed his pain, sadness, and inner struggle. That was enough to truly understand him. At the end, Juno thanked him for the day and said goodbye. Okuda responded warmly, wishing him well and remarking that they would definitely see each other again. Okuda continued practicing wind magic, reciting the wind spell out loud. He apologized to Ash, explaining that this was his way of observing how his magical abilities were growing stronger. At that moment, Margot appeared next to him and called out to him. Okuda was inwardly surprised and began to ponder the reason for his appearance. He wondered if Margot hadn't yet expressed gratitude for the bracelet Sarasa had given him. Thoughts about how difficult it was to understand someone else's feelings surfaced in his mind. At the same time, he remembered that he and Juno had immediately thanked Sarasa. Afterwards, Okuda told Juno to thank him too. As a result of everything that had happened, they stayed overnight at his place. Okuda thought with a touch of irony that his house was being turned into a hotel. He also recalled hearing that other adventurers, unable to stand the behavior of one of the nobles, left the city and moved their bases to other places. Okuda concluded that something similar had happened that time in the tavern. He reflected that any person in their right mind would have certainly gotten as far away from such a disgusting character as possible. Okuda couldn't sleep. He was overcome by a feeling of dread, and he admitted it to himself. A period surfaced in his memories when, even in the old world, he longed for complete solitude. Then he would turn off his phone and not respond to messages, seeking silence and solitude. However, after some time, he would again be drawn to people and return to socializing. The same thing happened with social media. At first, he would delete his accounts, but then reactivate them, continuing to interact with others. One of the reasons he wanted to move to the countryside was because he was tired of socializing at work. The fake smiles he saw daily disgusted him. He believed he would never interact with people again and strove for complete self-sufficiency, trying to have as little contact with others as possible. Even after finding himself in a new world, he felt that his desire for solitude had not disappeared. It seemed to him that rare meetings and short conversations with someone would be quite enough. With Juno, Margot, and Sarasa, or at least he thought so. Reflecting on all this, Okuda came to the conclusion that he couldn't be completely sure that his desire for solitude would not return. He was convinced that a person's worst enemy is themselves. Reflections haunt them, and the more they indulge, the deeper they sink into inner darkness. He realized he wasn't seeking an answer, but merely drowning in an abyss of despair. Feeling like a fool who had once again invented unnecessary worries, he thought that since starting his new life here, his long-ingrained false smile had finally disappeared. He felt that he had found something truly valuable, and his heart found peace for the first time in a long time. The peculiar relationship with these three comrades became something significant for him, and he was sure that they would remain with him for the rest of his life. The next morning, he finished his morning forging and was about to prepare breakfast, informing the others. Suddenly, members of the nobility entered his house. The noble's appearance was completely unexpected, and Okuda immediately realized something unusual was happening. He began to wonder if anyone really believed that the same squad could capture a dungeon, especially without proper preparation. It seemed completely impossible to him. He noted that when a person's anger reaches its limit, their face becomes completely impassive. To his regret, Okuda knew that at such moments he had to put on a mask and smile. A nobleman named Baron approached him and addressed him by name. Okuda immediately became wary and wondered what exactly he wanted from him. Baron began to speak in his own language, which he did not understand. Suddenly, something shocking happened. One of Baron's hands was cut off. Thus, despite the slow pace, the wounds that tormented Baron deep in his heart began to gradually heal. He maintained faith that, with time, everything would surely settle down and regain its proper order. Memories of his former self filled him with horror, for that man had completely lost his mind. After a tragic incident in the past, he too had become insane, losing his clarity of thought. However, at this moment, he firmly believed that he was no longer in a state of insanity. Baron finally came to understand the deep and excruciating pain people feel in their hearts. He realized that suffering from wounds and the loss of close comrades is one of the most unbearable feelings. A deep pain gripped his chest as he thought about those who had died because of his inaction. The thought of it made him yearn to stab his past self. So much regret for the atrocities he had committed had accumulated inside him that his whole body began to tremble with the realization of guilt. At one point, when he witnessed his son acting and making decisions, Shukara couldn't hold back tears of joy. His son, Heinrich, had assumed responsibility for running the city council and was handling the task with remarkable composure. For Baron, everything related to taxes and administrative matters seemed complex and confusing, but his son proved himself a true leader. Henry proved to be a magnificent and worthy man. Baron himself became increasingly convinced of his own unworthiness to rule. He believed he bore all the blame for what had happened. Although no one knew it, he began to fear the gazes of those around him, which seemed full of condemnation. His anxiety symptoms seemed to intensify. In the past, he'd acted mindlessly, feeling no pressure, doing whatever came to mind. Now he felt a weight of responsibility that threatened to crush him completely. He sincerely wanted to see the city flourish, filled with life and joy. While the villagers might have thought it would be better if he remained in his madness, he knew it wouldn't improve matters. Locking himself in his room would be easy, but it wouldn't help him fulfill his duty to the people. He remembered the residents he had known and those he had hurt with his actions. At some point, he summoned all his remaining courage and told Shirak that he would do everything he could to revive the city. Even though his body still trembled when he met people, he had recovered enough to respond to being called by name. One day, Shiraku approached him and apologized. It turned out that his son, Heinrich, had increased the monster-slaying tax and had entered into an alliance with the guild to jointly resolve all the city's problems. Baron thought it would be wonderful if his son continued to govern the city, but Shiraku had been waiting for his consent. Parallel to this realization came the understanding of how much suffering he had caused Shirak. Baron felt ashamed for having once forced the guild master to bow her head before him. Now he clearly understood how deep and intense Shiraku's pain had been. Overcoming his excitement, he bowed before Shirak and expressed his regret. Baron's thoughts became clearer. He understood that Shiraku was beginning to worry about him, but he also knew he couldn't stop halfway. He acknowledged that as a person he had made many mistakes, and one of the most serious was forcing others to bow their heads before him. Only recently had he come to this realization. As he reflected further, he realized there were still many people to whom he owed an apology. Among them were the innocent adventurers he had once unjustly imprisoned. He suspected that many of them now harbored hatred toward him. His actions had caused a multitude of problems affecting the entire city. Shiraku suggested that perhaps it would be best for Baron to leave now, and he couldn't help but agree. Over time, it began to seem to him that Henry was trying to avoid communicating with him. He didn't know what his son was thinking and assumed he might raise taxes. But then Henry declared that ensuring the city's security was the guild's direct responsibility. This decision was the result of their mutual discussion. Byron wasn't sure whether his son did it out of respect, but he knew he couldn't fathom all of his motives. He felt he had failed as a father and as a person. If his son were to one day follow in his footsteps and use his power to harm others, causing them suffering, Baron was ready to guide him on the right path. He considered this his unwavering duty as a parent. He, Lester von Baron, although not fully recovered, could already walk freely around his residence and its surroundings. Baron walked through every neighborhood, apologizing to the residents. If he had the chance, he would have liked to mend fences with everyone. He finally realized how difficult it is to achieve true forgiveness. For this reason, he made every effort. Byron knew that nothing would change if he again locked himself in his room and remained isolated. He asked the butler to take care of the horse named Melty. The butler accepted the order and promised to carry it out. Baron thought he had a reliable guard at his side, someone he could rely on. He then bowed and expressed his gratitude to Tony for his protection. Tony responded by affirmatively affirming that he would continue to fulfill his duty. Baron confidently declared that he, Baron, would fulfill his duty as a nobleman. He declared that from now on he would do everything possible to atone for all his sins. A monster suddenly appeared, its presence shattering the peace. At that moment, Shiraku shouted out Baron's name in concern. Next to them, Juno spoke words about the direction of escape, expressing confusion in the face of danger. Okuda, for his part, responded briefly, stating that he understood and grasped the situation. Using magic, he managed to erect a ward that could have provided them with shelter. In his thoughts, Okuda felt a paralyzing fear as his legs refused to obey him, and he hoped to remain unnoticed by the monster. Meanwhile, Sarasa bandaged Byron's wound and reassured him, repeating that everything would be fine, as if trying to convince not only herself but everyone else as well. In a daze, Okuda spoke the words about how they were able to survive, trying to confirm that thought. Juno turned to him with concern, showing concern for his well-being. He responded affirmatively, assuring him that he was fine. However, inside he knew that despite his outward calm, he was unable to do anything and felt helpless. But at the same time, he felt that he had a task before him that needed to be completed immediately. Okuda busied himself brewing potions, hoping they might be useful. He reflected on how even with magical support and potions, it would be extremely difficult to restore a severed arm, and the only consolation was that no one had died in that attack. He also smelled blood coming from him and decided he needed to take a bath, but he noticed that the fog was starting to thicken and it was expected to happen during the day. He later arrived at the guild building, where he approached Dan with a request to increase the reward for the quest. A memory flashed through his mind. The guild had already posted a request for the subjugation of the monster, but he had deliberately decided to increase the reward to attract more experienced and powerful adventurers. It turned out that the enemy they had mistaken for a simple creature was actually a lesser dragon, and if it had targeted Okuda himself, he would inevitably have perished. He felt an inner tension as he thought about how long he would have to live in constant fear and in anticipation of new attacks. Returning home, he began to check whether he was truly alone and tried to convince himself that no one was around. He considered visiting Margit, but then came to the conclusion that no place would protect him from a possible attack, and death would be inevitable regardless of location. He decided to stay home and try to distract himself. Thoughts swirled in his head, and he didn't know whether to be glad or sad about the thick fog that had enveloped his home. Okuda tried to overcome his fear by drawing. However, his hands kept shaking, making it difficult to concentrate. By morning, he realized he hadn't slept a wink all night. Seeing a cheerful dog named Ash, he noted to himself that maybe he should have gone to Margit's and gotten blackout drunk. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice at the door, and it turned out to be Margit and Juno. Okuda opened the door and admitted that this unexpected visit had scared him greatly. Margot showed him a drawing of a dragon on a piece of paper. He then tore the paper, which surprised Okuda. He felt relieved, realizing the threat had passed. Later, in his thoughts, he came to the conclusion that the huge lizard they had mistaken for a monster from the forest dungeon had in fact flown in from distant lands and simply happened to be nearby. It turned out that high-level adventurers had already defeated her in another city. Peaceful days had returned, and a feeling of relief washed over him. However, he understood that other monsters might appear in the future, ready to attack. When he spotted the new creature, he immediately realized it was a monster. He realized it had gotten lost in the fog and had accidentally ended up at his house. He began to assess the situation. The system provided data indicating that he was looking at a fighting bull, a cow-like monster that lives near water in the Lancaster region. Okuda recognized that it was indeed a bull, although at first he had thought it was a cow. After the fear subsided, hunger began to torment him. He thought that Margit and Juno were to blame for everything, for showing him too much kindness. Perhaps it was because he witnessed a nobleman's hand being cut off. He expressed dissatisfaction with the fact that all the cooking was left on his shoulders. However, he noticed that the thick fog had already disappeared. Okuda proposed a feast that included steaks, mozzanabe, smoked meats, liver, and a variety of other meat dishes. The friends began their meal and spent their time happily. Later, they admired the night sky. Okuda noted that Margot snored very loudly and remembered the shimno soup he had forgotten to drink. He looked at his friends and thought that they looked quite tired. He realized within himself that he could now be open with them. He felt that a relationship had been established between them in which they could call each other best friends. The soup didn't help with the effects of the night's drinking. He warmed it up, mentally noting that the herbs were indeed powerful. When they gathered again, he asked them to accompany him into the forest to collect herbs. His friends agreed, and he expressed his gratitude. He thought about how strange and pleasant it was to realize that even in a forest full of dangers, his heart was filled with peace. They collected a large quantity of herbs, and he was pleased with the result. Suddenly, Margot called out to Juno and Okuda. He responded and immediately noticed the monsters approaching. A blue wolf battling another monster came into Okuda's sight. He decided to assist it from afar, shooting his bow. Okuda's level has increased, now reaching 14. He thought that he did not want to take someone else's prey, but his arrow became the final blow. He later thanked his friends for their assistance and suggested leaving a request with the guild to subjugate a lesser dragon in case of any possible threat. Margot accepted the offer. Okuda thanked him again and said goodbye. He listened to the buzzing of the beetles, finding peace in it. Thoughts about the future brought tears to his eyes. Okuda didn't understand why he was crying, because he hadn't even had a drink that day. He remembered saying he preferred solitude. A realization dawned within him that the warmth that once entered his heart, it was impossible to forget. When everyone left, he felt loneliness especially acutely. Okuda realized that all good things come to an end: the fun, the singing, the cool night wind, the buzzing of beetles. He was overcome with fear that the night filled with loneliness would never end. He couldn't understand what was happening to him. It may have been a reaction to recent stressful events. He decided to calm down by drinking a cup of herbal tea. Even understanding the reasons for his condition, he didn't want to accept the truth. Okuda, I realized that I had become an adult who could not let go of my loneliness. When he woke up in the morning, he felt dizzy and realized his body had become heavy. He was overcome by heat, and he realized he was indeed ill. He tried to cook food for the chicken, but his strength left him. He eventually lost consciousness. Shiraku, as the master of the Leicester Adventurers Guild, noted that the nobleman Byron, the city's administrator, had recently begun mistreating adventurers. A huge stream of complaints had been coming in through Dan, the employee. As the guildmaster, Shiraku felt obliged to speak with Byron. Thanks to his position, he had a seat on the city council. The guild promised to destroy the monsters and capture the dungeon. Shiraku explained to Byron all the details and risks associated with this undertaking. However, Byron continued to insist on the cockatrice's subjugation. Shiraku tried to reach him, but to no avail. He could no longer stand by while countless adventurers gave their lives in vain. Byron also refused to allow the hiring of new workers. The only ones capable of defeating the cockatrice were Juno, Margot, and Okuda. Okuda was an expert in healing and could cure petrification. There was also a group of 3 who defeated the snake, recognized as one of the strongest in Leicester. Martial arts master Kai was also capable of giving the cockatrice a fighting chance. No one expected to encounter several cockatrices. Only thanks to Okuda did they escape death. Words cannot describe how grateful Shiraku was to him. Baron offered only 5 gold coins as a reward. No adventurer would risk their life for such a paltry sum. Dan looked at Shiraka with blank eyes, but he was powerless. The guild's honor was at stake, so using his own savings and the guild's, they managed to raise the required amount. After this, Shiraku advised Baron to surrender. He tried to persuade him numerous times, causing his hair to fall out. At that moment, a hole began to form inside his stomach, but the symptoms were manifesting in his head. Eventually, Baron ordered the same people who had been there the previous time to be gathered. Shirak had to bow his head again and again to disturb Keigo again. Okuda apologized for the suddenness. Baron didn't respond to his requests. Shiraku regretted being such a lousy guildmaster. When Baron dismounted to invite him, he was attacked by a lower dragon which tore off his right arm. Shiraku tried to fight back against the monster to protect Baron. He eventually managed to drive the monster away. From then on, Baron hid in his room, according to the butler, never leaving. Food was brought to him at the door. He conversed with a statue of a horse. This state of affairs had a negative impact on the city. Henry, Baron's son, spoke with his father and soon became the family heir. Henry was the complete opposite of his father, very wise. Thus, Shirak's restless heart found peace. Baron, a nobleman who lost his right arm in a fight with a lesser dragon, felt a deep fear of the world around him. This fear led him to lock himself in his room, refusing to go outside. To alleviate his loneliness, he ordered his favorite horse named Melty to be brought to his chambers. This behavior aroused suspicions of his madness among those around him. Byron felt like people were mocking him, which increased his anxiety and paranoia. He began to fear even birds and insects, wanting to punish anyone he felt had mocked him. His participation in the city's governance diminished significantly, and he avoided meeting people, as it caused him severe anxiety and trembling in his remaining hand. The loss of his right arm made it difficult for him to eat, and voices in his head insisted he deserved his suffering. Baron did not consider himself crazy, but he admitted that he was afraid of everything around him. The servants became cold towards him. He suffered from insomnia and wanted to disappear from this world, cursing everything around him. He couldn't remember the last time he had gotten out of bed and felt disconnected from his former self. During this difficult period, the guildmaster Shiraku showed his concern for Byron by finding someone who could remove Melty's petrification. This act inspired Byron to live. He began leaving his room in the daylight again to be with Melty, and gradually regained a sense of happiness. His sleep problems began to subside, although he still found it difficult to look his servants in the eyes. The voice quietly and caringly announced that it had brought a canned peach, expressing hope for a speedy recovery. Okuda responded with gratitude and called her mommy. Okuda woke up. He realized that everything that had just happened was just a dream and not reality. His first thought was that the fever that had been tormenting him had finally disappeared, and he felt a great sense of relief. He noted with alarm that he had lain unconscious for several days after losing his strength and collapsing from exhaustion. That day, he was busy feeding the chickens and apologized to them for not having had time to prepare the food before he collapsed from fatigue. Okuda added with relief that his health had already improved, and by a happy coincidence, not a single customer had come while he was sick. He bitterly admitted to himself that he was seriously afraid of dying completely alone without anyone's help. Okuda thought about the concept of kodo kashi, which refers to a lonely death in which the body is found only after a long time. With sadness in his heart, he thought of his mother, with whom he could no longer communicate. A painful thought crossed his mind that she probably thought he had simply left home, abandoning everything. Okuda felt a deep pain in his heart as he thought about how dear the people around him had become to him after everything that had happened to him. He hoped that everything would be fine with Margot and the others despite his absence. Rather self-reproachfully, he called himself useless, admitting that although the fever had passed, he still needed rest. He decided that the day should be spent quietly, allowing himself to relax and make a couple of potions. As he watched the potion brewing process, his gaze fell on a familiar figure. He saw Juno. Okuda immediately recognized him and noted to himself that he had not seen this man for quite a long time. He learned that Juno had come with an offer to go on a subjugation mission, but explained that he had only recently recovered from an illness. Due to fatigue and general weakness, Okuda politely declined the offer. Juno, accepting the refusal, calmly turned around and said goodbye, promising to return tomorrow. Okuda wished him luck in return as he watched him leave. After their short conversation, he thought again about his symptoms and remembered Juno mentioning that there was a doctor in town. He concluded that potions were not always effective in dealing with fever, and decided that going to the hospital would be a wise move. Later, while inspecting his supplies, Okuda noted that he had managed to make quite a large number of potions. At this time, Juno approached him again, calling him by name. Okuda asked with slight surprise whether he had just been hunting, judging by his appearance and tired look. Okuda noticed medicinal plants and food in Juno's cart, leading him to suspect Juno had gone into town first, rather than straight on a mission. Juno explained that it was all for Okuda. Okuda was touched and expressed his gratitude, although he had nothing to thank Juno with except the potions. He invited Juno to stay the night, glad to have a friend nearby, especially in difficult times. Juno said a lot happened while Okuda was sick. Okuda decided to stop being lazy, but first he wanted to get a good night's sleep. In the morning, Juno said goodbye to Okuda, who wished him luck. After a good night's sleep, Okuda felt much better and decided to stretch. At that moment, Byron, a nobleman whom Okuda had previously dismissed as an idiot, appeared. This time, Byron was unaccompanied by adventurers. Okuda decided not to mention that the three of them were going into the forest together. Byron bowed and apologized to Okuda, which surprised the latter. Okuda couldn't believe his ears and mentally questioned whether this had really happened. Soon, Byron handed him a heavy sack. Okuda was surprised by the weight of the sack and noted that it contained approximately 500 gold coins. He wondered what Byron hoped to achieve with this act. Concluding that this was compensation for past inconveniences, he acknowledged that such an act was unexpected and rare. Recalling their last meeting, he noted that Byron seemed to have become a decent man. Seeing his sincere demeanor, he believed he was genuinely remorseful. Now that the nobleman's threat had passed, Okuda had no reason to refuse the gift. He decided to start small, treat Byron to something delicious. The scene unfolding in his home seemed familiar and warm to him. He remembered that smoked meat was popular, especially among the nobility. Tony, the nobleman's bodyguard, explained that his master had now been replaced by his son. Okuda realized that many changes had occurred during his illness. He set to work cooking, roasting a whole hare with garlic, salt, and aromatic herbs. Believing such a dish would appeal to a person of the upper class, he devoted himself to the culinary arts. Byron's expression at the tasting was unexpected. Okuda realized the effort had been worth it. A dog named Ash approached him, looking for a treat. Okuda assured her there would be food for her too, adding that she should eat her vegetables too. Noting the direction of the nobleman and Tony's path, he noticed that they were heading towards the forest and the stables, and not towards the city. He tried to restrain them, but it proved tiring. They looked like drunken commoners, and he thought he'd give them some shimno soup after they woke up. In the morning, as expected, he found them in a pitiful state, though he was still shocked. He said goodbye to them, wishing them to take care of themselves. Now that he had saved up a lot of money, it was time to think about using it wisely. He went to a merchant he knew to discuss future investments. In town, he met with Margot, Juno, and Sarasa. They discussed installing crossbows and building stone walls around his property, considering stone was stronger than mud. He also expressed a desire for a bath and a proper bedroom. Considering he still had a fair amount of money left, he complained of being tired of living in a chicken coop. They agreed on further cooperation. With the help of friends, he arranged meetings with artisans and building material suppliers. He also visited a doctor named Kishu-sensei to ensure medical care was available. Although he wasn't sure of the exact level of medicine in this world, he was pleased by the mere existence of doctors. He instructed Sarasa to deliver everything he had purchased, including materials and food, to his home. Okuda decided to smoke the meat as a token of gratitude to his friends for their help. Realizing that he could no longer return to the hermit lifestyle, he thanked them from the bottom of his heart. A few days later, he looked around with admiration at the erected protective wall, the bed, and the bedroom. He described his new home as a true fortress, the realization of his dreams. Okuda expressed hope that wild creatures like snakes and flying lizards would no longer view him as prey. He sincerely thanked everyone who helped him. Margot approached him and called out loudly. Okuda suggested celebrating the completion of the construction and offered him a drink. Margot asked if Sarasa was nearby, and he replied that she wasn't. Okuda pondered. He thought that Margot might be avoiding meeting her. Margot raised his glass and proposed to drink to the completion of the construction. Okuda noted that he hadn't had time to try the shime-no soup again. He remembered drinking with his best friend until the early hours and thought it was a worthy cause for celebration. He came to the conclusion that they were both hopeless adults. The next morning, he woke up with a heavy head. He was convinced that giving up the shime-no soup had indeed been a fatal mistake. Okuda lay on the ground, thinking that he had become lazy again. Several days had passed since the completion of his house. With the stone walls erected, he felt a long-awaited sense of security, and it was this security that caused him to relax. With the feeling of threat gone, the energy he usually expended on everyday activities dropped from 10% to just 3%. He still had gold coins, so he didn't have to worry about work. This allowed him to sleep and wake up whenever he wanted. It seemed the dreams he'd been cherishing for a while were starting to come true. Perhaps he'd slept too much the day before. It was still very early, the sun hadn't even risen yet, but he was already awake. He was the first to open his eyes that morning. Even the animals around him were still sleeping peacefully. In these precious moments of silence and peace, he decided it was time to collect his thoughts. He was glad that Juno's feelings for Sarasa were mutual. However, from the outside, it seemed Sarasa also showed some sympathy for Margot. Okuda wondered if Juno had given up on trying to win her over. It would have been easier if he'd found someone else, but Okuda knew Juno was a good guy and probably didn't suffer from a lack of female attention. As for Margot himself, he continued to avoid Sarasa's persistent attempts to attract his attention. Nevertheless, it seemed that success was just around the corner. Besides this, Okuda remembered Byron. The loss of his arm could have been one of the reasons for his recent behavior. The gold he gave to Okuda as an apology turned out to be incredibly useful. It was used to build a stone wall and became a real salvation. He came to the conclusion that there was no point in holding a grudge against Byron any longer. His attention shifted to Byron's son, who now ruled the city. According to Margot and the others, this man was one of those who abused his power. Although Okuda was reluctant to interact with the nobles, he was prepared to intervene if anything serious happened. He remembered the many people he had met: Secretary Dan, the guildmaster Shiraku, Kai-sensei, Han-sensei, who taught him useful skills. 3 adventurers, a mason, and artisans, thanks to whose labor he acquired a house and stone walls. Later, he met Dr. Keisha, a Byron guard named Tony, a baker named Taylor, and many others. So many people cared for him. In the previous world, he was simply trying to survive and had no time to think about others. He came to the realization that no matter how much a person denies it, it is impossible to live without the help of others. He resisted this understanding until the very end. However, there were things he did not want to forget. His dog Ash remained the cutest, fluffiest creature in the world to him, and he wanted that to never change. The days were growing shorter. Autumn would soon arrive, followed by winter. With the first snow, he planned to ask Margot to install a fireplace. The thought of taking a bath and watching the snow fall brought him pleasure. He hadn't done anything special for the past few days, so he decided that after sleeping he should take a bath. In the morning, Okuda remembered leaving his fishing rod somewhere. He was sure he'd left it there and finally found it. It looked perfectly functional. He used a local worm as bait and went fishing. Once he reached the river, he noted that there seemed to be no monsters in the area. For the first time in a long time, he could sit calmly by the water. Suddenly, the fishing rod twitched. He caught something. It turned out to be an ayo fish. He decided to taste it. This fish could be used for sashimi if it was parasite-free. His experience cutting fish in Japan had finally paid off. He carefully began cutting it, then tasted it. As expected, the fish was delicious. The system confirmed it was indeed delicious. He pondered the best way to prepare it: salt, fry, or make sashimi. He decided to catch more, but ended up falling asleep. When he woke up, he felt joy that his friends were nearby and everything was okay with them. Okuda realized it was time to end his fishing and move on. He stood up, called his horse, Rosinade, and set off. Okuda returned home and was delighted to find that his friends had already arrived. Inside, the atmosphere of preparation was palpable. Everyone was bustling with anticipation of the celebration. It was a fortunate coincidence. He had just caught a large quantity of fresh fish, so the evening promised to be especially delicious. He proposed a toast, as such gatherings call for a real feast and a warm table. The friendly cooking began. Okuda began preparing the fish, carefully grating the garlic, explaining where to place it, and then took on the task of making the sashimi himself. He remembered that he'd never seen anyone serve raw fish in the city, and he waited curiously to see how his guests would react to see if they'd enjoy this Japanese delicacy. When everything was ready, he announced that the food was served and invited everyone to the table. The first course was shiitake, fried fish with salt, followed by sashimi. Sarasa was amazed by the new food, and Okuda showed her how to properly squeeze lemon juice and emphasized how delicious sashimi is when served properly. Looking at their expressions, he realized this was their first experience with this kind of cuisine. He was delighted to see how much they enjoyed it. At that moment, he noticed that Juno looked a little depressed. He smiled and offered him to try more food, assuring him that the taste would definitely bring him back to life. However, Juno, a little flustered, mixed up the dishes, calling sashimi shiitake, and the situation became slightly awkward. Okuda pretended nothing had happened and again offered everyone a drink to maintain the festive atmosphere. He sensed the atmosphere had quieted down a bit and decided to liven it up by offering his congratulations to Margit and Sarasa, as their behavior the previous day had been so touching that it hinted at an imminent wedding. Indeed, the newlyweds confirmed his suspicions and thanked him for his kind words. He soon learned that they were planning to hold the wedding ceremony at his home in 2 days, inviting only their closest friends. Okuda noted that Juno looked particularly dejected. But glancing at the guest list, he noticed the name Elsa, Juno's girlfriend. A flash of surprise flashed through his mind, so Juno already had a girlfriend. This meant that all the previous day's conversations, filled with sympathy and consolation, had been in vain. However, he couldn't be angry. On the contrary, joy for his friend overwhelmed him. After the evening ended, Sarasa thanked him for everything, and they said goodbye until they met again. Okuda was left alone, pondering how to celebrate his best friend's wedding. With only 2 days left until the celebration, he began planning a bath, entertainment, food. He decided to start with cooking. Since everyone loved fish, he went fishing and even sacrificed his chickens. The wedding day approached. The morning's fishing had been successful. The catch was excellent. He prepared the yakitori, pouring care and love into each dish. He was especially proud of the breaded chicken, which he considered a top-notch dish. All that remained was to prepare the fresh fish. When everything was almost ready, the heroes of the occasion, Margot and Sarasa, arrived. Juno followed them and introduced his companion, Lady Elsa. Okuda greeted her warmly. Inside, he felt a faint sense of recognition. She was the daughter of the owner of the tavern where Juno lived. His thoughts raced. He realized how lucky Juno was because Elsa was not only beautiful but also kind-hearted. He was truly happy for his friend because he knew the difficulties he had to go through. After congratulating Juno, he turned his attention to the final preparations. Baron's son suddenly appeared. His presence caused general surprise. Okuda noted that this was the first time he had seen this man. When Margit turned pale at the sight of the guest, it became clear his arrival boded ill. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he was certain of one thing: only a savage could ruin such a special day. The blue wolf is a proud hunter of the dense, wild, free, and harsh forest. He was born into a pack ruled by a wise and strong leader with whom he shared respect, loyalty, and a spirit of unity. But one day, a man entered their lives, unusual and formidable, possessing power beyond anything the blue wolf had ever encountered. This man belonged to a high rank in his kind and wielded a strange magic alien to the beasts. He defeated the leader in a brutal fight, leaving him no chance, and taking the leader's cub with him, he departed, leaving the pack orphaned and shaken. The wolf understood that if he had rushed into the attack that day, he would have died without a doubt, because without preparation and understanding of the magical nature of the enemy, he did not have a chance. Having lost their leader, the pack was left without direction and the pup's fate fell into the hands of a human. Although this initially caused alarm, over time the blue wolves began to notice that the human was not harming the pup. In fact, he protected it, caring for it as if it were his own. The world they lived in was cruel, the strongest survived, and no rules could alter this natural order. However, another feeling is born in the heart of a devoted beast: respect. Realizing the impossibility of a fight, the blue wolves adopted a different form of loyalty. From then on, they decided to watch over the pup and his new protector from afar. Not to interfere directly, but to come to its aid when it was in danger. Out of respect for the pup and its human, they occasionally scared off other wild creatures that might harm them. But one day, something unexpected happened. One of the blue wolves strayed too close to the camp and fell under the influence of strange magic. He lost control and found himself wounded. Just as he was about to accept his fate, a puppy now grown appeared before him, shielding the wolf with its body, heedless of its own safety. The beast's heart pounded. It was a shock, for in a world ruled by kill or be killed, such an act of kindness was truly rare. The man, this unusual, almost alien wolf, not only didn't turn away but treated his wounds, healed him, and showed concern. This once again confirmed that before them was not just a man, but something else, something deeper, something nobler. Another day, when a man and a puppy headed to the lake to fish, wolves, as usual, guarded them from a distance. Their peace was disturbed by the sudden appearance of a bear who was about to attack. Then the blue wolves entered the battle, fighting with all their might until they drove the beast away. When they returned from the battle, they saw a touching sight: a puppy, tired but whole, resting peacefully in a man's arms. This sight touched even the rough heart of the forest warrior. Later, when the wolves returned to their camp, they found it empty. There were no people, but freshly caught fish and a wooden cup containing a potion remained, as if left in gratitude. It was a sign. The man knew all about wolves, knew of their help, and valued it. The wolf admitted defeat, not in battle, but before the humanity and kindness of this extraordinary man. Since then, despite the passage of time, the blue wolves continue to guard the territory where this man and his charge live. In their hearts lies the hope that the pup will grow up strong, wise, and just. After all, blue wolves are more than just animals. They are intelligent creatures of this forest, loyal, proud, and capable of feeling. Elsa is the owner of a tavern and bar in the city of Leicester, a place where the destinies of many travelers, artisans, and adventurers converge. Thanks to her sensitivity and practicality, she managed to create not just an establishment, but a true home for those who cannot afford their own. This applies especially to poor adventurers who live off the odds and always live on the brink of death. Elsa's Tavern offers the most affordable lodging in the area, making it a haven for those seeking not only a roof over their heads, but also warmth, care, food, and compassion. Among the establishment's regulars is Juno, an adventurer with a kind heart and indomitable spirit. Elsa has known him and his friend Sarasa since childhood. For many years, she harbored warm feelings for him, which over time blossomed into true love. However, Juno's heart belonged to another, Sarasa. Elsa saw this immediately, unmistakably. For a person in love senses even the shadows of another's affection. The pain of realizing this love was silent but sharp, for Sarasa didn't reciprocate Juno's feelings. She was in love with Margit, a master blacksmith, a talented merchant who handled metal like an artist with a brush. And despite the bitterness, Elsa had to admit, they truly were right for each other. Meanwhile, Juno suffered. His love tormented him from within. He lost weight increasingly, becoming sullen and distant. He, whose life depended on physical strength, allowed himself to waste away. Elsa tried to support him, caring for him, feeding him, coaxing him to eat. But he pushed her away with words, sometimes harsh ones, and yet she stayed close, enduring, not leaving. Her love demanded nothing in return, it simply was. Every morning, Elsa looked at herself in the mirror, examining her freckles, which Juno had once found charming. She knew that Sarasa was not only beautiful on the outside, but also a kind-hearted, worthy woman. But despite this, Elsa's heart was breaking with envy, with bitterness, with the desire to be in the place of the one to whom Juno would dedicate his soul. And suddenly, everything changed. Just when Elsa had almost resigned herself to it, Juno said what she'd been waiting for. He wanted her to be his girlfriend. His words tore down her inner barriers, causing the tears to flow freely. They had a frank conversation about how Margit had once managed to let go of the spirit of his late wife Isabella, and how Juno had found the strength to let go of his feelings for Sarasa. Elsa, of course, still feels a little uneasy, remembering his old love, but there are no more secrets between them now. He knows she loves him, and that makes her happy. It was the brightest day of her life. Sarasa's wedding day, Elsa dressed up in a special way. She wore her favorite dress, the very shoes she'd been saving for a special occasion, and a piece of jewelry, an earring Juno had once given her. She didn't hide her freckles with makeup. Juno said he liked them, and she decided to be herself, embracing who she was. The wedding took place at the home of Juno's friend Okuda. Elsa recalled him once visiting her tavern. His charisma, jet black hair, and kind gaze left a lasting impression on her. He also had the cutest puppy who literally stole her heart, and now she rejoices to see him again. Elsa's heart is filled with a slight thrill and joy, the anticipation of something good and bright. With love in her heart, faith in the future, and inner strength, she faces a new day. In the city of Leicester, the new ruler was Lord Henry, the son of the previous ruler, known for his tyranny. Seeking to distinguish himself from his father, Henry made efforts to gain the trust of the townspeople, winning over influential figures and ordinary citizens to his side, which strengthened his position. People began to call him wise, and he enjoyed the feeling of power, knowing that his decisions determined reality. Wanting to maintain power, Henry imposed high taxes on the population, forcing people to work for him until they were exhausted. When his father attempted to regain control by increasing taxes to support the Adventurers Guild and the army, Henry managed to suppress his ambitions and reclaim control of the city. Considering the problems resolved, he began to consider his next steps. While studying the city's economy, Henry noticed Margot's weapons shop, which sold fire and water daggers, helping to revive the economy. Wanting to take advantage of this, Henry decided to establish control over Margot and his activities. However, according to his subordinates, Margot stopped selling such weapons, which led to the idea that he had a hidden source. Finding the store closed, Henry noticed Margot and his companion's carriage leaving the city. Guessing that their destination might reveal the source of the unusual daggers, he ordered 4 subordinates to follow them. Henry was determined to make Margot pay her dues and make a doubly profitable profit from the situation. Okuda was stunned by what was happening and tried to figure out the situation. He noticed a stranger who entered his house uninvited and expressed his indignation about it. Okuda tried to call security, but to no avail. Realizing that arguing with an influential person was pointless, he decided to use sashimi as a way to defuse the situation and offered the uninvited guest a taste of the dish. At that moment, Baron appeared and addressed Henry, which allowed Okuda to understand that the stranger was Baron's son. Okuda realized that their argument was related to family differences. Since the day was special, he urged everyone to calm down and listen to him carefully. Baron tried the sashimi and was pleasantly surprised by its taste. Margot confirmed it was sashimi. Okuda expressed delight that the dish was well-liked and offered to save some for the other guests. Realizing that the more people, the merrier, he suggested inviting everyone to Margot and Sarasa's wedding. Henry agreed to attend. Margot thanked Okuda for his help, to which he replied that it was no problem. Okuda noted that he hadn't expected so many helpers and believed that now was not the time for arguments. Preparations for the party were in full swing, and the long-awaited moment had finally arrived. Baron turned to Margot and Sarasa as they entered the hall. Okuda noted that he rarely saw Margot wearing a jacket, and the moon-colored dress perfectly highlighted Sarasa's beauty. Margot and Sarasa exchanged vows and put on rings, after which the guests congratulated them. Okuda noted that he had never seen such a wedding in this world, but everyone was smiling without realizing it. The atmosphere suddenly changed, and everyone immediately moved on to the party. Okuda brought out sashimi and chicken, urging the guests to help themselves. The 2 men were performing a strange art which left Okuda puzzled. He remembered that at similar events when he was a merchant, there were games with stockings on the head, which gave him goosebumps. He was glad that such competitions didn't exist in this world. However, he was concerned about the lack of a wedding song at the ceremony. Okuda took the stage and announced he was going to perform a song. As he began singing, he expressed the anxiety and trepidation of loneliness. The song conveyed the feeling of friends gradually drifting apart, finding their place in life, and, as they themselves described it, becoming henpecked. Okuda noted that even without knowing the language, one can feel the meaning of a song with one's heart. After finishing his performance, he congratulated the newlyweds. After the party ended, Sarasa and Elsa said goodbye, saying they would see each other later. Okuda also said goodbye to them, wishing them all the best. Margot, Sarasa, and Elsa headed home, leaving the remaining guests who were quite drunk. Okuda, taking charge of them, moved them with difficulty, expressing dissatisfaction with their condition and threatening to throw them into the smelter for such a night. Later, he noted that the night breeze was pleasantly refreshing, creating the feeling that all this fuss had been just a dream. Reflecting on the events that had occurred since his arrival in this world, Okuda noted that humans often contradict themselves, isolating themselves from others and gradually leading to extinction. Despite this, he managed to find friends with whom he wanted to share the best moments of his life: Margot, Juno, Sarasa, Elsa, and of course, Ash, the sweetest creature in the world. He noted that everyone was captivated by the newlyweds' smiles, including himself. It was a circle of happiness, with Margot and Sarasa at the center. Okuda noted that he had never seen anything like it in Japan. He reflected on how words could be both a blade and a mirror, sometimes causing pain and sometimes reflecting the truth. Okuda admitted that he had previously avoided this, preferring to decide everything himself rather than rely on others. In a world where Japanese is not spoken and where one must risk one's life fighting monsters, the light of the blue moon falls from the sky directly onto one's heart. Okuda wondered if all this was a dream, because then all the contradictions would become clear. He felt he could now open up to others, deciding to take his time and enjoy what he had. For now, he only wanted to move on with his life and looked forward to the contradictions he would face tomorrow. He couldn't help but smile, realizing that he himself had once been a contradictory person. Okuda suggested leaving the cleaning for tomorrow and just relaxing today, noting that his friends were too noisy. He found joy in bringing happiness to others, and now he enjoyed it even more. The day after the wedding ceremony, Okuda decided to continue training in wind magic, seeking to strengthen his skills. While the others were still recovering from the effects of the holiday, he had already returned to his usual routine. Suddenly, Ash's loud barking caught his attention. Okuda turned around and saw a giant snake standing before him. Realizing there was no time to think and no help to be found, he decided to act immediately. Okuda attempted to attack the serpent with the piercing arrow spell, but it had no effect. Realizing the monster had no obvious weaknesses, he used the scan skill to identify its vulnerabilities. The system reported that Okuda's level had increased, and his scan skill had improved to level 2. This revealed that the serpent possessed the deadly venom skill, capable of corroding almost anything it touched, but was not immune to toxins. This gave Okuda the idea of turning the serpent's venom against itself using the Gust of Wind spell. At that moment, the blue wolf came to the rescue, attacking the serpent and distracting its attention. Okuda realized this was an opportunity for a counterattack. Observing the serpent's behavior, he tried to anticipate the moment when it would use its poisonous breath. As soon as the snake opened its mouth, Okuda cast the Gust of Wind spell, directing the poison back at the monster. The snake began to coil and some of its scales fell off, revealing a vulnerable spot. Okuda seized the opportunity and delivered a decisive blow with his sword, finally defeating his opponent. After the battle, the system notified Okuda that his level had increased to 15. He thanked the blue wolf for his timely help and made sure that he was okay. Later, when Juno learned of Okuda's feat, he was amazed and expressed his surprise. Okuda, himself somewhat shocked by what had happened, along with Juno, tidied up the battlefield and handed over the snake's body to the town butcher. Elsa soon appeared, concerned about Juno's condition after the party. Okuda noticed her displeasure and assumed she was angry because Juno had left her alone. He hoped they could make peace. Reflecting on recent events, Okuda wondered what the serpent's scales could be turned into. He was also troubled by the serpent's presence in these parts. He suspected that the dungeon was overrun with monsters again and that clearing them out alone might not be enough. Okuda realized he'd been lucky in this battle, and that had he been unarmed, the outcome might have been different. This prompted him to consider further improving his skills and magical abilities. Okuda asked Kai-sensei and Han-sensei to teach him. He thought about wind magic, believing that it required more training and experience to improve. Okuda was confident that he could use higher magic like Tornado if he mastered the basic skills perfectly. He considered the next step to be unarmed parrying. He also thought that learning a couple of martial arts techniques wouldn't hurt. Kai demonstrated a few moves for him. Okuda mentally exclaimed that he couldn't do this, asking to wait. Inwardly, he was indignant that no one understood how he had managed to live to his age. Okuda didn't want to die while learning the new skill. He realized that he seemed to have no choice. The system notified that Okuda Keigo gained a new skill. The new skill was called Moonflip. He exhaled heavily and was surprised to find that he'd gotten it right the first time. Okuda thought this world was unusual. He didn't expect to learn so much here. Okuda convinced himself there was nothing to fear. He decided to move on to the basics of magic of other elements. The wind, he noted, dealt well with the kites. He remembered that there are only 6 elements: fire, water, wind, earth, light, and darkness. I never thought before that light magic would be so useful at night. He became interested in how far he could advance in his study of light magic. he noticed that the carcass had already been cut up. The butcher reported that it was the most delicious snake meat. Okuda thanked him and asked doubtfully if it was really tasty, offering to sell it. He thought that, knowing the origin of the dish, he didn't really want to eat it. He was surprised to learn that the meat cost as much as 8 gold pieces. He took with him the scales, fangs, and poison glands. The cutter said goodbye to him. Okuda responded and thanked him for his help. He figured that there was a high demand for scale armor at the moment and decided to sell it to Margot. Okuda came to Margot's house. Sarasa, seeing the scales, exclaimed in surprise. Margot immediately declared that he was buying it. Sarasa objected that it was hers. Okuda thought that they were husband and wife and didn't understand why they were arguing. He decided that the scales would be a wedding gift. Considering they were on their honeymoon, he didn't want to disturb them from enjoying their vacation. He gave the scales away free of charge. As he was about to leave, he said that he was leaving. Sarasa asked him to wait and handed him the bottle. He realized that this was the same liqueur from the wedding. Even though he said it was a gift, it would have been impolite to refuse. He accepted the liqueur with gratitude. At parting, he wished to see you. At home, he noted that the liqueur was truly excellent. However, sleep overcame him. He thought it had been a very eventful day. Okuda was surprised to feel very tired. He hugged his puppy Ash and told her that she was a good one. Okuda noted with satisfaction that the ash wolf's fang had made a worthy necklace, which he hoped would protect him. He took the dagger in his hands and, turning to it, continued to think about the future object, figuring out what could happen to it. After a short pause, he came to the conclusion that water was best suited for enchantment, and this caused him to smile cheerfully. He was pleased to realize that he had finally mastered the art of enchantment, even though he knew that such tasks were usually performed by Margot. At that moment, Juno's voice suddenly rang out, calling out to Okuda. Okuda flinched in surprise, admitted that he was scared, and asked what he was doing. In response, Juno gestured to him to indicate something that required his attention. Okuda didn't understand, but then he tried to decipher the gestures. He came to the conclusion that he was talking about drinking and hinting at a girl. He decided that Juno was inviting him to a tavern where he could be discharged or meet girls. Juno explained that he was heading home and would return at night. Okuda answered hesitantly, agreeing, although he continued to think that everything that was happening was not at all like Juno's behavior. He began to wonder if something was bothering his friend again, since he clearly didn't want to just chat over a drink. Okuda remembered how in the past he himself was not averse to a drink after a hard day at work. When evening came and it was already dark, he decided that he would not be able to take the puppy Ash with him, and so he decided to leave him with Sarasa. Once in the city, he realized that he was right. Margot came to the shop, and the conversation was about delivering daggers. Margot thanked him, adding that the shop was still open, and invited him in. Okuda replied that he would return soon and moved on. Margot nodded affirmatively without objecting. Sarasa's shop, Okuda called out her name to get her attention. He noticed that there was no joy on the woman's face, and he wondered if he had entered at the wrong moment. However, upon seeing Ash, Sarasa immediately changed. Her mood became noticeably better. She affectionately named the puppy and expressed her affection, admiring his fluffiness and kind nature. Okuda asked her to look after the dog, explaining that he wanted to spend some time with his friends. He thought that perhaps he should have been honest and said that they were going to the tavern. To clarify the situation, he gestured that the meeting involved fun, alcohol, and possibly the company of girls. Okuda felt that Sarasa's face changed, and he realized that he had made an awkward mistake, causing her displeasure. To somehow smooth things over, he left a coin, calling it compensation, and once again asked to take care of the dog. Okuda finally met up with Margot and Juno, thanking them for waiting and noticing that they had already started drinking. Margot invited him to join, and Okuda agreed with a little trepidation. He began to think that perhaps the tavern would be a good place to relax and try something new. The meeting place turned out to be a tavern called the Butterfly Cradle. Okuda noted that the room was furnished quite simply and without frills. He was surprised and wondered if they really came here just to eat, because the establishment seemed familiar to him from his memories of the previous world. He didn't expect to find himself in this particular place, but since he had come, he decided not to stay on the sidelines. He was surprised that there was only one girl for each of them. Juno wished him luck with a smile. Okuda didn't immediately understand what exactly it consisted of. One of the girls invited him to sit down next to her. He mentally noted that he had been given a calm and beautiful interlocutor. Okuda greeted her and expressed his pleasure at meeting her. The girl answered him, clarifying that it was already evening outside. He remembered that it had indeed been dark for a long time, and he realized that he was a little nervous. Since communication was difficult, Okuda suggested that the girl correspond via letters. She agreed and wrote her name on the paper, Urina. He offered her a treat, wanting to show her attention. Urina thanked him for his gesture of politeness. I felt a bit like one of those accountants from the academy who learned foreign words at incredible speed while on business trips abroad. However, in this situation, everything seemed a little more complicated than just learning a language. Okuda began to wonder if Margot and Juno had brought him to this place specifically so that he could better master the local language. Although deep down he had hoped for something completely different, he was also interested in how their evening was going. Okuda turned his head towards Margot and noticed an unexpected and rather strange picture in front of him, which immediately caused an internal reaction in him. He mentally noted that if Sarasa found out about this, he would most likely tear Margot to pieces, but then decided that it was still Margot's personal business. Okuda turned his attention back to his conversation with Urina, wondering what topic he could choose to continue the conversation. The idea that something interesting and unusual could be discussed flashed through his mind, and then his attention was distracted by music. He heard the bards singing and wondered what exactly the song was about. Okuda continued to communicate with Urina, using paper and pens for correspondence. In order to understand what she was writing, he used his evaluation skill, which helped him decipher what was written. He realized that the essence of the song was this: on a distant mountain located in the west, a great tree has been growing for 10,000 years. Hidden in the roots of this tree is a flower that shines golden, brighter than the sun itself, and it is called Urion. This sacred tree is guarded by powerful divine beasts. According to an ancient legend, the nectar of this flower has the ability to heal any disease. It can be used to make an elixir if mixed with other rare ingredients, the herb irene and the healing plant melon, adding to them the hair of a divine beast. Okuda noted to himself that all of this was extremely interesting and informative. He thanked Urina for such an amazing story, expressing his sincere appreciation. In his mind, he confirmed his earlier guess that girls in bars really could be the best teachers of foreign languages. He remembered that his friend had not lied when he told him about it. When the meeting came to an end, the girls said goodbye, inviting them to come again. Margaret confidently confirmed that they would definitely return. Okuda also thought that he would like to visit this place again to continue his conversation with Urina. After leaving the tavern, Margot asked if Okuda liked it. He responded enthusiastically that the evening had been magnificent. He thought that everything really had turned out exactly as Margaret and Juno had planned. They were worried about him because he hardly interacted with women. Okuda understood that if it weren't for his friend's initiative, he himself would never have decided to come to such a place. He believed that his acquaintance with Urina was possible solely thanks to the efforts of Margot and Juno. Okuda spoke kindly to the puppy Ash, surprised by her appearance. He didn't immediately understand how she ended up here. At that moment, Sarasa and Elsa appeared in front of him. He realized that the situation had changed and announced that he was going to go home and go to bed. However, Sarasa suddenly grabbed him and Margit and dragged them both home, not giving them a chance to object. Okuda apologized to his friends internally, feeling that what had happened was partly his fault. He felt awkward because, although he didn't think he had done anything wrong, he still felt guilty. Inwardly, he reminded himself that he had the right to remain silent. Margit and Juno bowed before Sarasa and Elsa in respect or perhaps repentance. Okuda noticed the atmosphere gradually calming down. Ash the puppy suddenly turned and began sniffing something. Okuda asked him what exactly he was doing. The puppy stuck its muzzle into Margot's pocket and pulled out some object. It turned out that this item belonged to one of the girls from the tavern. Sarasa noticed this and expressed suspicion, asking about the origin of the thing. Okuda felt a strong sense of anxiety and thought in his mind that this was the end. He felt that perhaps right here and now he would pay for everything. However, Sarasa suddenly declared that he could go. Okuda took this as an opportunity to leave without consequences and said goodbye, apologizing. He thought that now his main task was to get home as quickly as possible, because there was no point in staying on this battlefield. Okuda was repairing the house on the roof and smelled some pleasant smell. From that moment, he couldn't get her out of his head, and it seems it's love. If so, it will soon pass. He is never in a romantic mood for long. He did all his business and noticed that it was already late and the tavern was already opening, but despite the desire, he told himself that he had nothing to do with it. But on the other hand, he wanted to drink something tasty. There were many different drinks in the tavern that he would try. Besides, it was time to learn the language. And yet he decided that going to the tavern would be useful. He was nothing but trouble. In the end, he went to the tavern and even bought souvenirs that the girl really liked. She also added that it was a good snack to go with drinks. After that moment, Okuda visited her very often. He liked spending time with her. But the more he enjoyed his time, there are times when he comes back to reality. He doesn't brag, but at work he was popular with women, but he builds walls around his heart. He hurt people who became close to him. Noticing this, he felt so much pain that he began to hate himself. He could no longer act impulsively when it came to romantic relationships. He wondered if Yurina knew how he felt. She gave herself entirely to just chatting, drinking, and making him happy. He would never leave her. She really listens to what he says. He is interested in this city and the world, and she was always interested in what he says. Maybe it's just a technique for seducing men, but he sees that she really enjoys spending time with him. He looked only at her. She shone like a star. He wanted to know more about her. He kept saying that he wanted to know her better. He wanted to know her secrets, and he would also reveal his secret to her. She agreed. Okuda would never have thought that the time spent with her would be so fulfilling. He returned home and thanked the man for looking after Ash. He also said that he was glad that everything was going well for him and Juno. The man smiled and suggested lighting a fire. It seemed like it was late autumn now. The winter would be so cold that the boys would be able to see diamond dust in the air. So Okuda had to have time to prepare himself for the bitter cold. He said goodbye to Juno and the man and left. Returning home, he got to work, that is, deciding what the gift would be. He began to copy into a book what he saw today. He was sure that Yurina would be delighted because she was a curious person, and she could still add recipes, but this was not so important to notice. At the end, he signed that the book was addressed to Yurina from Keigo Okuda. The guy understood that the girl might think he had no taste because he was giving her a book he made with his own hands, but he still decided to see what would happen in the end. He lit the stove, the house became very warm, and now there was no need to worry about winter. Time passed. The guy came to Yurina and brought her a book. The girl was very surprised by such a gift. The guy was amazed that she also gave him a book. And also a whole outfit. It was winter clothes that they wear in this country. He had to change into it right now. Okuda said that it was very warm, and Yurina told him that he looked very good and asked if she could look at the contents of the book right now. And as soon as she started reading, she immediately realized that it was simply wonderful. And at that moment, Okuda realized that the effort was worth it. The girl was amazed by the contents of the book and read it avidly. She offered Okuda to read her book too. She gave him a grimoire, The Basics of Survival, Ice Magic. She was so close when she explained what was written there, so the guy tried to concentrate on the text. There he learned to use ice magic and added this ice to a drink. The guy was very happy when he succeeded. He received a new freezing skill, then he realized that he could acquire skills from books. And now he understood how Yurina made ice in the form of stones. He decided to try to test the magic, despite the book. As with other spells, the amount of energy and time spent on it brings different results. He added ice to Yurina's glass, for which she thanked him and offered to read the book together. Okuda thought that he liked his book, and he was happy to know it. It seemed like he spent so little time with her. When he and Yurina time flew by unnoticed. It was so easy, so calm with her. After a while, he returned to Juno and thanked the guys for looking after his pet and went home again. It was already night, so he lay down on the bed. It seemed to him that the reason why he did not want to get close to people was probably hidden in the words of his boss. Being late is the same sin as murder, because by being late he takes away other people's time, and this means that he takes their lives. If you think about it, he did not always treat other people with care, which means he took their lives. But in this world he doesn't have that feeling when he communicates with Juno, Margot, Sarasa, and Elsa. They may have slowed him down, but that's probably what friendship is. Then he began to think about Yurina. Thinking about it, he realized that it was not about taking the lives of others, but about sharing his own with them. Perhaps it was his destiny. Although he just said something very romantic, he did not understand what was happening to him. The more he thought about the girl, the more he felt like he was plunging into a deep labyrinth. If he was asked whether he liked her or was disgusted, he would answer that he liked her. He did not understand why love was so complicated. While thinking, he found himself in the city. He really didn't understand himself. He came here to buy winter clothes while the cold is not in full swing. While he is here, he decided to give Yurina another gift. It was a water dagger. The girl asked him if he was sure that he wanted to give it as a gift and promised that she would take care of it. someone started to disturb them with their voices. Okuda decided that next time he would need to bring a weapon with him. He couldn't ask the girl such a thing, but he was curious if the other visitors gave her anything. His heart was very heavy. He trained during the day because he still felt weak, but he promised that he would train more to become stronger. He saw his pet scratching against the wall and decided to see what was there. If there was a monster behind the wall, he could aim from above, and there really was a monster bear behind the wall, but it was different from the usual ones. Okuda used the assessment on it. It turned out to be a red-furred grizzly. It was a rare variety of grizzly, autumnal and red, and if they belonged to the fire elements, water should work well against him. He began to load the crossbow with arrows and take aim. He fired and hit him, but did not understand whether he killed him. He couldn't see anything because the grizzly began to glow very brightly. It turned out that at that moment he had come very close, and at the last moment Okuda managed to kill him in the head. His level increased, and he was able to cook food for himself from this bear. It was very tasty. It was the first time he ate such fresh bear meat. Their meat turned out to be softer than earthly bears. He also made a potion with an egg, but it seems he can't help but try it. After drinking the contents of the bottle, he felt that his body became lighter. Ejiru's healing potion, it restored body parts. It was the most powerful restorative potion that Okuda had so far, but he didn't really want to drink it when he knew what it was made of. He decided to ask Sarasu to sew a quilt from bear skin and got ready to go to the city. And he took a small bottle with him. He brought Sarasa the skin and asked her to take care of it. There was something else for which he came to the city. This is the residence. He was very nervous when he drove up to it. He stood in front of the residence of Mr. Bowerrun. The guard Tony recognized him. Okuda told him that he came to see the master. He was escorted to him. They came to the master's office. Keigo was asked to look out the window. There he saw the master. It seemed to him that he seemed to have a lot of free time, like a retired lord. Tony told the guy that he would meet him right after the walk. The guy immediately began to take out a bottle, a potion for healing body parts, also known as Ejiru potion, and he wondered if it would have any effect. Bowerrun came into the office, and he and the guard were very surprised that such a potion existed. Tony asked to drink it. Keigo understood that this was a very valuable potion, and it should not be drunk like that, but if he hid it, he would be tormented by nightmares. Bowerrun immediately began to feel a surge of strength. And Keigo was right, the master's hand was indeed restored. With this potion he would no longer be so helpless, and it was better not to tell him what was in this potion. Now Keigo had finished all his business in this residence. He said that he would go home, but Bowerrun stopped him and snapped his finger. It was rude to refuse the gift, so he should gladly accept it. To survive in this world, you need to have at least a little money. After all, there are no marketplaces here, and people will not understand what he is talking about. And meanwhile, winter was already approaching, and Keigo thought that there were still a lot of monsters that he would encounter. Suddenly he felt a little depressed. He scratched Ash, who was also afraid of the cold, and decided that it would be better to look forward to the snowfall and playing snowballs. Then he would dress up as Santa and give gifts to Urina. There was no Christmas in this world. Even if it was, Christmas is usually spent with family. The guy became very curious if his quilt was ready. He went to the store where he took his quilt and asked the girl to keep the change. Keigo's money, in fact, he just thought that counting change was a headache. Explaining all this was also a headache, so he just took the money. He returned to his home. The stove was already lit. Besides, he covered himself with his blanket and said that it was very warm. He thought he could survive the winter. He started playing with Ash, but suddenly someone knocked on his door. Juno and Elsa came. It seemed like this was the first time they came to visit him alone. Besides, the guy still had bear meat, so he decided to treat them with it. They all really liked it. If Keigo remembered correctly, Elsa doesn't drink, so he poured her some juice and himself and Juno some drinks. He supposed it was hard not to drink when you run a tavern. Unexpectedly, the guys turned to Keigo at the same time. They both wanted to tell him something. So Juno decided to speak first and asked the guy if he was dating Urina. Keigo thought that the guys came just to ask this. Everything was complicated, so he just dodged the question and asked what they were even talking about. Juno understood him and they didn't ask anything else. Time passed. The guys had already started to leave. He hadn't gone to the tavern last night, but still everything was fine. Going to the tavern wasn't some kind of duty after all. He decided to do some chores. He wouldn't be able to collect water when it snowed, but he would be able to melt the ice that would collect. They would be able to fill the bathtubs much faster, and they had water in stock, so today they could take a bath, so the guy did. Romance in movies and real life are very different. You need to make an effort to live each day. Installing the bath and thinking about everything that was happening took Keigo all day. another cold day arrived. The guy was building something and saying that because he still had to get married, his boss was constantly telling him that he had to compromise. Didn't that mean he had to sacrifice himself for others? The guy believed that he should have the freedom to choose how he wanted to live. Unlike romance, being able to survive is much more important. Romance is a complex thing, and monsters are all over the world. It was interesting that if the dragon attacks again, will he be able to protect Yurina? Even protecting himself seems impossible. There must be someone more capable for her than him. He brought Margot a dagger. He signed some papers and left again. On the way, he thought why he was so lost. He didn't know what to do. Doing nothing, he felt so ordinary, and again he wanted to break all ties with people. If you think about it, the only entertainment he had was taking a bath, eating, fishing, and writing. There is no internet or games in the era where there is no internet and social media. People are left only to communicate with each other. However, as everything around them develops, they will be able to communicate with each other all over the world. At the same time, all this had the opposite effect. He was used to the way they communicated with each other before. They could exchange just a few phrases and end the conversation. You can protect your heart from intrusion. When it comes to romance, the heart becomes heavy. In fact, most of the pain in the heart is due to love. People prefer to choose the path without pain. In the end, everything came from our ancestors. When the heart works beyond its capabilities, a person will be able to feel his love. The declining birth rate is also because of this. People just can't get married. Keigo thought about Yurina a lot, so he thinks that his heart is also at the limit. And then his mind begins to resist. Even though he loved her, his mind refused and he contradicted himself again. Such behavior should be natural. Now he sat alone and understood that he should feel better. After he dug into himself, he realized that there was no person on the planet more unhappy than him. Meanwhile, in the tavern, the guys were having fun and drinking, but suddenly Yurina came running, who seemed to be in trouble. Keigo was sitting outdoors and fishing. He saw himself in the reflection and said that he looked like a dead man as usual, and every time, he didn't even know what to do. He is an outlier in this world in every way. He thought it would be a welcome change of scenery. He didn't even understand how he got to the river and back. It was sad, but in any case, as long as he's alive, that means he needs to eat and continue doing what he does. He cooked a fish whose roe could be marinated in salt and chilled with ice cream. He could make a cod appetizer. He just happened to have some chili peppers in the shed, and if you marinate them together, you can come up with a new flavor. But when he went outside, he saw Ash barking at the fence. He saw girls there. He opened the fence and they ran in. The guy asked what happened. Ash's reaction: they were probably being chased by monsters. He didn't want any trouble, so he closed the fence behind him and said that it was better to go inside the house. The girls thanked him for his help. Keigo didn't know what was going on. The girls started to undress, but the guy told them that he didn't think they should relax too much in the house of an unknown man and asked them to put their fur coats back on. Suddenly, Ash fell silent. The guy became curious if there were any traces of monsters outside and said that he would look outside. The girls, with shaking hands, offered him to sleep with them. He understood that they were tired of running, but they still offered it to him. He refused and said that the bed he was about to show them was intended for guests. He led them into the room, lit the stove, and left them there. He did not understand why they were alone in the city and explained that they probably had their own reasons. He did not blame them for this. It was night now. He would ask them to leave in the morning, and he himself went to reconnaissance. After making sure that everything was okay, he returned home, drank something, and decided to go and rest. Because he was not feeling very well, he fell asleep, but he was awakened by a light that suddenly appeared in the room. These were girls who came into his room and climbed onto the bed. He asked them to stop and leave, but they did not listen to him, so he had to climb onto the table. And then he was about to run out into the street, but a man burst into the house who said that they were his girls. Keigo did not understand what was happening. The man asked where the potion was. Keigo did not understand how he knew about the partial action potion. But if he meant the potion that healed the right hand of that nobleman, then someone revealed the secret. The man started to attack Keigo, but he set his hair on fire and kicked him out of the house. He suggested that perhaps Heinrich had sent him. The man ran away. Keigo began to think about what to do next. He looked at the girls and realized that he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't really imagine the right time to send the girls out into the cold. Behind the fence, he saw a cart with Margot. The guy didn't expect to see them. The guys were very scared for Keigo. They told him everything and the situation became clear. It turned out that the girls were drugged. Yurina talked to the employees of the beauty salon. It turned out that the former Iroquois was a bandit from the red light district. He ordered 3 beauties whom he chose in the lantern district to attack Kano and kidnap him. Yurina learned about this plan through her connections in the entertainment district. She told Margot and the others, and they hurried to the scene. The girls were sent to sleep in the blacksmith's hut. Margot approached Keigo and whispered to him that Yurina was very worried about him. After that, they decided to throw a party. Keigo tried to invite the 3 kidnappers, but they were too embarrassed and refused. There was little food, but it was already late, so they would have to make do with this. He thanked the guys for waiting and said that there was a new dish on the menu today, cheese and cod roe. The guys were happy about this too. They said with amazement that it was very tasty. And also, it's great to eat together. Yurina started pouring drinks. Keigo asked her if he could talk to her outside, and they went out together. For some reason, he stopped showing up at her store without saying anything. It was very cold outside, so the girl immediately began to shiver. Keigo was amazed that she rushed after him in such thin clothes, so he had to apologize to her. He put a fur coat on her, and they looked at the sky together. It started snowing. Now Yurina looked like an angel with perfectly white wings. She was smiling broadly. Keigo apologized to her for not going into her store. He had to tell her what he wanted. He had to tell her how he felt before Yurina disappeared along with this light snow. The girl asked him why he was thinking. Keigo replied that he couldn't stop thinking about her and admitted that he loved her, and the girl replied that she loved him too. They looked into the distance with relief. Then the guy shook the snow off the girl, but she asked in surprise what happened. Tears appeared in his eyes. Keigo thought that it seemed like he started crying without even realizing it. At that moment, the desire that so powerfully took hold of his heart, it seemed to him that it would disappear along with the melting snow. If Yurina was in trouble, he would be the first to come to her aid. Whenever she was sad, he wanted to be near her. He answered her that everything was fine. The tears came on their own. He was ready to be her shield and sword on this fantastic night where the wings of angels dance in the air. Ash jumped out from somewhere. It turned out that the guys were watching their confessions, and everyone immediately felt awkward. But a moment later, they began to congratulate Keigo and Yurina. The young people looked at each other with affection. After that, they cheerfully chatted with the guys about their love with Yurina. Everyone got drunk. Keigo never dreamed that they would have such a fun and happy night, that everything would turn out exactly like this. They all lay down next to each other on the floor and fell asleep. The guy decided that in any case, it was getting closer to morning. He had to cook rice soup for everyone, except for Yurina, who quickly sobered up. He had such a hangover that he lay in bed for another 2 days. In the morning, everyone was already getting ready to leave. Each of them had their own jobs. The guys said goodbye to Keigo, and he gave Yurina a blanket. He learned a couple of words in the local language. Yurina also learned a few words in Japanese, and they were both a little happy. They all agreed to see each other later and said goodbye. Keigo was left alone, but he started sneezing, and Ash said that everything was fine. It was time to go home. Only a few hours had passed since everyone left, but Keigo already wanted to see Yurina. He didn't want to be alone. He was very lonely. He took his things and ran out into the street. I set off on my way, and along the way he wondered if Yurina was still working in that establishment. He was sure she was used to dealing with drunk men, and as soon as he imagined this, he became enraged. He understood that she was free to do whatever she wanted, and interfering meant limiting her freedom. He knew that this wasn't a very good idea. But now he is losing control of his feelings. He knows that he should not be so impulsive, but he could not help himself. He came to the tavern. Margaret and the others were already asleep. Because it was midnight, he did not want to wake them, so he decided not to call them. He himself approached the doors of the tavern, but he was feeling very ashamed. He had come a long way and was already standing in front of his goal. He was so worried that he did not attach any importance to his excitement. But if there was ever a moment in his life when he needed to act, that moment was probably now. He opened the doors and entered the establishment. He immediately saw Yurina, who was being looked at lovingly. The guy closed her off from everyone and took her aside. He asked her not to be afraid. The girl understood that he was worried about her and thanked him, but the visitors were not at all happy with his appearance. Ash began to bark, and all the girls gathered around him, touched. They started touching him one by one and saying that this was their little furry client. Keigo thought that it seemed like they didn't have any problems with pets. Ash was popular wherever he went, as if he was the mascot of this place. Yurina showed Keigo where the two of them would sit and started pouring drinks. But suddenly a woman approached them. She was the mother of the whole enterprise. Every time he saw her, for some reason his danger sensor went off. He felt that he should not go against her, and he was glad when she simply came to say hello. He thought she would break something because he came with a dog. Bandits entered the building, saw Yurina, and immediately reached out to her. Keigo understood that they were the kind of people you shouldn't mess with, but they approached him themselves. The man began pointing to his head and saying something in the local language. The guy immediately realized that it was the guy with the mohawk that he set on fire. He sympathized with the hair. But Yurina worked here, so he needed to sort things out peacefully so as not to bring even more trouble on her. He had little on hand since he gave most of it to the nobleman. He took out a bottle of potion and told the man to drink it. He himself did not know if this potion was suitable for hair, but the man drank it anyway. And the mohawk grew again. Keigo had some kind of feeling of deja vu, and the hair seemed even longer than before. Everyone was happy for the man that his hair had grown back. The young man thought that now he could relax and enjoy a drink with Yurina, but the man grabbed her hand and said that they were not finished talking yet. The guy jumped up and set his hair on fire again with a fire sword, and the mistress hit him in the stomach, so he fell to the ground. Keigo thanked the woman. He asked Yurina if everything was okay. He didn't know that even Mrs. Yurina would be in danger and it was no longer safe for her to work here. He told her that they would leave here together. He turned to the woman. The manager of the establishment explained that he was taking Yurina. He mentally begged her to let him through, because now was not the time for words. The owner actually seemed much scarier than those bandits. So Keigo took out a bag with 300 gold coins and gave it to the woman. For him, Yurina was more important than any money. The girl also asked the owner to let her go. She didn't want to do it, but still agreed. Yurina hugged her and thanked her. The woman promised to distract the bandits while the guys ran away, and that's what happened. The bandits tried to grab Yurina, but the woman stopped them and fought them off. It didn't last long. Yurina and Keigo weren't able to run very far, so they turned into an alley and ran deeper. They hid behind a barrel. Keigo immediately began to think how to protect the girl. He froze the puddle. But he had very little mana left, so he needed to replenish it somehow. He used wind on some girl, and her skirt rose up. The bandits paid attention to this, and they immediately rushed towards her, but because they were on ice, they slipped and fell. The guy checked if they were alive, and then Yurina grabbed him and told him not to dare lift her skirt for him. The guy apologized to her, and they went to his cart. As he heard, the bandits were arrested, and now they would not threaten them, and besides, he took their weapons with him. They reached the gate where a guard greeted them. The boys did not stop and continued driving. Then they kissed, and all the howling that night fell silent. The snow stopped falling, as if nature was congratulating them. In the silence of the road, where only the sound of the carriage could be heard, the girl wrote a letter to the guy. If it became difficult for him to be with her, if they could no longer bear each other's pain, then he could leave her. She, of course, could cry, but she still wanted to be near him because she loved him so much. Yurina knew all about Keigo's urges for separation and his misanthropic nature. She accepted him, even prepared her own figurative escape route for him. He didn't even know how someone could be so kind to him. He's just an irregular factor in this world, and he wondered if one day he suddenly woke up and found himself in Japan. If tomorrow he was suddenly separated from Yurina and Ash, he's sure his heart would be broken. He can't let Yurina know about this. He couldn't live without her anymore. This is how his life with Yurina began. He hoped that they would grow old like this, and when they became grandparents, he wanted to tell her every day that he loved her. He was sure that everything would be fine for them, no matter what. After a while, Yurina heard someone knocking on their door. They had guests. It was Margot and Juno. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. It turned out Yurina had left her things with them. Keigo was wondering how the mother from Yurina's former place of work was doing. They moved all the things into the house. Juno was talking to the girl. Margot at that moment was thanking Keigo for the cheese and cod roe. He said that if you think about it, they ran out of ingredients, so they need to go fishing. The guy decided that he would go fishing and asked to guard the house. Margot agreed. He and Yurina kissed in front of the guys, and they began to happily look at him. Keigo blushed and went to the river. He missed Ash's warmth, so he needed to finish and get back home as quickly as possible. But at the edge of the road he saw something. It was something strange. It was full of holes, and looking closer he realized that these holes were made by thorns. Suddenly he was attacked from behind, but the shield blocked the spikes. It was a new kind of monster. The guy did not expect this. He used the appraisal skill. It turned out that the monster was a giant echinoderm, very similar to a sea urchin. Perhaps the number of servants being killed has increased, and maybe the ecosystem is collapsing, which is why this edge appeared in the river. The guy took out a thunder sword and, defending his horse, went on the attack. Then he hid behind a rock and realized that these spikes are specially located for equal intervals of time, and when he shoots, several others are needed to reload. While reloading, he jumped out to deliver his first blow, and he succeeded. He was able to kill this hedgehog. His level increased. While the water was cold, the guy decided to gut the monster. Then he used the assessment, but the analysis was only superficial, which looked very promising. The guy ate a piece of hedgehog. And even the purple sea urchin grown on first-class kelp did not taste as good as this one, and such a size it was even a little scary. He went up to the cart and loaded the urchin. The guy was so excited that he screamed loudly. He needed to take the prey home as quickly as possible before new monsters attacked. He returned home. The guys were very surprised by his catch, and if you think about it, they had never eaten something like sashimi and probably had never eaten such a grotesque creature. He began to cook with the catch. The first thing he put on the table was sea urchin in salt water. He hoped that everyone would be able to appreciate its taste. The guys tried it with apprehension. Keigo at first did not understand what their reaction was. But then the guys started saying that it was great, very tasty, and now Keigo moved on to the main course. He explained that to get the texture of the sea urchin, you had to mix the dish with an egg, and a soft, fluffy omelet with cheese and urchin was ready. He was happy when his friends enjoyed his food. After they had eaten everything, they asked for more. When everyone went to rest, Keigo decided to go to the bath. It was high time for him to rest. In winter it was best to swim in the open air, because it is always warm when you get into the water. The sky is clear and the stars are beautiful. The feeling of his frozen body relaxing was simply irresistible. Someone knocked on the guy's door. He thought it was Margot. I asked if the food had really run out. But it was Urina. The guy was very scared when he saw her without clothes. He asked her what happened. She climbed into the water closer to him. They sat back to back. Keigo felt that women in this world were very persistent. She turned to him. The girl stood up and asked to look at her body. The guy began to turn around because he thought that in the end he was a man, but he couldn't. He jumped out of the water and ran into the house. He realized that the main culprit of all this was Juno and called her a pervert. She began to apologize, and a dissatisfied Urina also entered the house. She was angry because the guy left her alone. Keigo came up to her and said that he loved her very much and began to apologize. He saw how Margot and Juno looked at him mockingly and did not understand why they were doing this, because it was their fault. The night fell and the boys went to bed. Keigo was still sitting at his desk and writing something. In another world he was, without exaggeration, a recluse. Urina, the love of his life, the girl he cherished very much. Now he has someone to protect, this time for real. That's what really matters. He can't pretend to be a lone wolf anymore. However, he still has a problem. It is that aristocrat Henry who sends his thugs after them. He likes this house. But if because of the location Urina will be in danger, that is another matter. They had a lot of money, and the chickens are fine, so they can leave. But the guy stopped these thoughts and said that he would stay because he was not alone. When he woke up tomorrow, he would talk to the guys. On this day, he told everyone the whole truth, that he had cured Master Bayern's right hand with a potion, and about the attack on Urina, that the thieves were most likely sent by Bayern's son Heinrich. The conclusion they came to coincided with the one he had come to last night. If the aristocrats in power took the matter seriously, he would most likely be captured before he had a chance to resist. He and Urina would leave this house. They would leave here in a carriage. Margot gave Keigo a map. A map of the surroundings of the Kingdom of Lancaster. He hadn't needed it until now, but it would be useful for a quick overview. The guy thanked the man. Urina told Keigo that she had never set out on a journey before. She was even looking forward to it. Margot agreed with her and said that such a trip would be a fun event. He will definitely go and overthrow this Henry and then come for him, but for now he can enjoy the trip with Urina, and they will take care of the rest. Keigo thanked Margot and said that since they had decided, they can already pack their things. The chickens will go to a farmer who knows Sarasu. Margot will go with Juno, who partly hunts monsters, and they will also take Elsa. Keigo didn't want to cause them any unnecessary problems, but he just had to make sure they said goodbye. Between packing his things, the guy wrote a letter to his best friends. He asked them to read the letters when they were alone. There was one more important thing. He would be traveling together with Urina, and he had to take a step. The flower was given to her by him, but the girl did not understand this. He promised that he would love her all his life and protect her from adversity. After that, he wondered if he had said it well. In any case, he would never find words to describe her beauty. The girl, in response with tears in her eyes, said that she would love him all her life. He was her sun that shines every day. The oath that Sarasa taught him was said by him. It means a happy marriage. He also gave a special flower before escaping. A wedding just for the two of them. Ash barked that Keigo was a real priest. After this, the guy felt a strange sense of courage. He reminded the boys once again that he had left them letters, and now he was setting off on a journey. Farewells were difficult. They couldn't stay in this place any longer, it would only get harder and harder. Keigo didn't think they would ever return here. Margot said he was going to overthrow the nobility, but honestly, he doesn't think it will happen. He hoped that the boys would take care of themselves and be happy, and he would protect Yurina. The wolves were running level with them. Yurina was happy about this. Keigo asked her what Margot gave him. The girl answered that it was a means of self-defense. It was a slingshot. If you add an attribute to the projectile, then it seems that it could be a real weapon, and apparently Heinrich collected them because she got it from him. Keigo was almost certain that Heinrich was hunting him, and he didn't think he would ever live to regret his decisions. That potion should never have been seen in public. They were on the brink of disaster, and there was nothing better than going on a trip that didn't involve anything like that. He would take this as a good opportunity and look at it from the bright side. They were going to Tirana. It was dangerous to drive at night on unfamiliar roads. Even though the wolves were helping them, they couldn't let their guard down. They stopped for a rest, and for a moment it was like a honeymoon for Keigo. The honeymoon, horseback riding under the starry sky, was very romantic, but where they stayed, the guys were in full view. And the carriage was without a roof, but Keigo had 3,000 gold coins, and with the money he could buy a covered carriage. He wondered if the other guys were looking at the moon now and fell asleep with Yurina. The next day came. Suddenly birds flew out from behind the trees. Keigo immediately became wary because there was an incomprehensible sound. It turned out to be a monster cockatrice. Yurina wanted to cover him, but the guy said that it was too dangerous. She needed to move away. He understood that he was no longer alone and they would survive together. The monster had not noticed them yet, but just in case, he decided to conduct an assessment on him. New information had appeared. Keigo used a summon and sent the wolves to attack and eat the cockatrice. Now the monster couldn't attack because it was being held back. Next time he would use a poison arrow to kill it for sure, and it actually worked. Now all that was left was to finish off the monster. His summoned creature had attacked him, and now there would be poisonous breath from the cockatrice. The guy shouted to the blue wolf to retreat. But the wolf didn't make it in time. Keigo understood that things were bad, but Yurina came to the rescue. They attacked the monster together. Suddenly Keigo had a level up, but he didn't care about this level. He poured a detox potion into the wolf's mouth. He hoped it would help, but it didn't. They made a grave for him and Keigo buried him. He thanked him for protecting them and for wanting to be with them until the end. He did not feel weak. He was filled with strength, as if in honor of the triumphant return of the hero. Henry was dissatisfied with the reports from the bandits who had carried out 2 unsuccessful operations, and the guys had also managed to escape. He asked them what the hell was going on here, and he didn't need an apology. He demanded results. They began to tell him that according to the mafioso they had hired, Johnny and his gang of 7 devils, a man named Keigo seemed to be a very dangerous person. If this happens, they will make their move, tie up Keigo and Yurina and bring them to him. They will sit at Heinrich's feet. He laughed in response and asked to forget about it and get on with their main business. The man rang the bell. A servant came and was told to call the captain into his office, and that he should gather about 50 people. He told the master that he could rely on him. Henry thought that since Jill would be present in person, it looked like Keigo wouldn't survive today. If they took his girlfriend hostage, he would have no choice but to make a potion to restore body parts, and he had already made arrangements with the Church Inquisition for a special torture chamber. He would make the boys regret it, and they could no longer count on a decent life. But as with the dagger, someone will definitely rise up. They completely took control of the city council. They even managed to attract such an influential person as the Adventurers Guildmaster Schillag to their camp. Now Heinrich believed that he was no longer his father's plaything. And executing or imprisoning them would be difficult because it would damage his image. At least his henchmen could be driven out of Leicester. After that, house arrest would relieve him of this problem. Henry decided that, for starters, Donnie and the others could drive his father's lieutenants out of the city. That day, Keigo sent each of the guys a letter. He said that reading each other's letters was strictly forbidden. He wrote to Margan that he knew it was a little inconvenient, but he was writing to him. He said that he was going to overthrow Henry, but he hoped that he would not take it too seriously. Everything would be fine between him and Yurina. If they were pressed, they would run away in the other direction. When he first came to this world, Margot sold him weapons and armor for free. He was very grateful to him for this. Without this, he would have been killed by monsters. Then he began to come to his house at every opportunity. It was very annoying, but it was fun. He knew that he could be a little unsociable and knows that he goes out of his way to keep him company. He thanked Margot for being there without saying a word. He felt that this was the only thing that saved him. The guy asked Margot to take care of everyone in Leicester, especially the adventurers, because their lives depend on the dragon's anvil, and he wished him and Sarasa all the best, and to keep Sarasa and Elsa in the dark about his thoughts about the impossibility of returning to Leicester. He did not like to talk a lot, so he left everything as it was, and he hoped he would understand why. The man squeezed this letter and wished Keigo to take care of himself. Then there was a letter to Jun. Keigo wrote that he was embarrassed to talk about it. He told Margot that he thought he would never return to Lester. That's why he wrote to him. He was indebted to him because together they defeated Cockatrice. He couldn't have done it alone and it was hard work, but when they did it, he felt great. When he lost his heart to Sarasa, he was so exhausted and depressed that he didn't know what to do, but he was very happy that he found Elsa. He was going to go north to the city of Turret, and then he would continue to travel and protect Urina until she was safe. A man protects the woman he is in love with, and he must understand this. He apologized and admitted that he would stay with them forever if he could, but it seemed the situation did not allow it. He asked to look after everyone in Leicester and asked not to worry because he would be happy with Urina. And finally, he asked not to get involved in too many adventures and not to make Elsa cry, but to make her happy and not to tell Sarasa and Elsa that he was unlikely to return. They would probably talk about it, and his hut would come in handy when they went to the forest, so they could use it if he wanted. He could live with Elsa. Sarasa had the key and said goodbye to him. June said that he would definitely help him and wished him luck in his first big adventure. Keigo also wrote to Sarasa. He wrote that perhaps she was worried that he would not be able to return to Leicester, but he promised that he would return, and Ash, whom she always cared about, would miss her when he first came here. She made a deal for herself when he did not know what was good and what was bad. She kindly introduced him to the Adventurers Guild. Without her, he would have died long ago. He also started to tell her that the raw sea urchin he ate yesterday was an egg from a water monster's nest. He wanted to feed them to Juno and Elsa, but he wouldn't be able to do it anytime soon. They were in the river where he usually went, so she could ask Margot and Juno to bring them to her. Their weakness was lightning, and he also asked to tell them to beware of the spikes because they fly at the enemy every 3 seconds. He wrote so much that it was hard to summarize. So he would leave it as is. Eliza that she had been very kind to him. He would definitely return to Leicester to see how she was doing. She could use his hut as she wanted, along with June. He didn't mind if they lived there. June was inclined to be an adventurer, so he would be grateful if she looked after him and didn't worry too much. She had always protected Ash, and he was sorry that they wouldn't see each other for so long. That's how fate had worked out. The girl showed the letter to Jun. He said that he understood what her letter said. Keigo wished them happiness. He was not going to say goodbye. Junho told Elizabeth that sometimes he would clean and stay with her. But Margot was very unhappy. He called Keigo a misanthrope who didn't even want to live in Leicester. He didn't understand how he was going to live without their help. The man was in despair. He believed that Keigo should be free. He started writing a letter to Master Bairn and everyone else he knew. He was going to defeat Henry and save his friends. That was all he could think about at that moment. Ash spoke in his own language that this precious name was given to him by the Master. He sees the color of the soul of a creature because a spot comes out of its body. Master and Urina together, their soul color is as bright as a fire. Since Master and Urina are together again, he is glad that the color of his soul shines more beautifully than before. Sarah's and Elsa, he was sad to say goodbye to them. The memories of the time spent there warm his soul, but now he is having fun in adventures with Uncle Blue Wolf. Uncle Blue Wolf taught him many things. He told him directions and where to find villages, and also the wolf village. There was a giant sacred tree there that was said to be over 10,000 years old, and when a wolf dies, he becomes one with the tree and turns into a heroic spirit. That's why wolves are brave and can stand up to the strongest enemies. Ash is the next master, so he needs to develop slowly and not rush, but next time he must learn to speak well. The wolf was so kind, sometimes strict and courageous. But Cockatrice killed him. He and his uncle's friends sang a requiem for Wolverine. His soul disappeared into the sky with a warm glow. He was returned to the vessel of his soul. The wolves said that Master Keigo was a very strong person. He even defeated Ash's mother, who was their master. Ash knew about it, but only vaguely. He barely remembered his mother, however. She attacked the master, and the master defeated her. That's all he knew. Ash was a wolf like the others. He thought that the law of the jungle was normal. The owner and uncle too. They fought for life, for protection. If he loses to a stronger opponent, he dies, that's all. So Ash was not going to think of the owner as his mother's enemy. He is not only strong, but also kind, and most importantly, he has a very beautiful soul. So he will continue to fight for his mother and uncle, who are watching Ash from the tree. He will fight for his master. The wolves recognized that the little one had become stronger. They did everything they could. Having left the place where the boys buried the blue wolf, they continued on their way to the city of Turret, and after a while they finally arrived. According to Urina, traveling artists come to this city even though it is huge, but they must be careful not to leave traces. The girl looked tired, and there was nothing surprising about this because they had already spent several nights in the cart. They came to one of the inns. It was not yet clear how far they would have to go, so he thought that he should provide the girl with the necessary respite. He paid the boy to look after their things and do some small shopping for them. he promised that everything would be ready by the morning. They had a kitchen and a shower in their apartment, and the room they got was very nice. The guy said that they would have a good rest today, but suddenly the girl came up to the guy and said that she didn't want him to run away today. Time passed. In the morning, the guy, as he said, brought everything that was ordered from him, including a cart with a roof, and he bought an excellent horse. The guy was paid for the work. Keigo named the horse Queen May. The boy said that it was just a wonderful name. The young man asked the boy to help him carry his things. The boy in response asked how many silver coins he would give him, but it was just a joke. Yurina went outside and handed him a piece of paper. It said that the girl wanted to see the city. They were only in the next town, and Keigo was going to rush off and go as far as possible, but Yurina wanted to at least look around a little. So the guy replied that of course, since they were in this city, they would take a walk, and they went for a walk. They reached the circus, where they had a lot of fun. After the walk, they checked out of the hotel. They would have enjoyed a tour of the city, but perhaps they shouldn't stay here too long. And Keigo's premonition was right. They didn't yet know that they were a hair's breadth away from danger. Henry was disappointed that he could not catch him. As soon as he received information from a noble from Turin about the location of Keigo, he called the Juro Corps in pursuit, but the permanent courtyard where they stayed was already empty. At the same time, accusing Keigo of a crime, he gave the order to post a wanted poster around the city. But even so, they could not catch him. It turns out that Keigo is not so easy. He even thought about putting a big reward on him, but that would be boring if he died. There was a chance that if Henry overdid it, other nobles would notice his talent. This potion belonged only to him, and he had no choice but to do it secretly, and then to force him to submit, he would order Yurina to be tortured in front of him. He told the guards to get him a horse, and he needed a new woman. He was definitely going to give the guy a taste of humiliation. Meanwhile, Johnny was a street thug. He grew up in the slums and had a huge rival. He also suffered in his time, but thanks to his henchmen, he began to have fun. In the end, he became the owner of such a magnificent mohawk. And every time he is praised, he is filled with happiness. One day they received an order. The client was an elderly gentleman with a white beard. Although he behaved somewhat atypically after they began to implement his plan, the first stage was seduction, the second was kidnapping. Everything ended in failure. They even lost their weapons, and as a final touch, Johnny even managed to lose his precious mohawk. Next came a description of Yurina, who worked in the tavern, and although the establishment was small, she still perceived it as a family. Each of them had their own past, which the guys carried within themselves, and this applied to her too. She had an older brother named Sito. Burns, cutting, tying up, violence, offensive words. Their childhood was filled with unbearable things because of this. When the girl was 7 years old, her mother committed suicide. One day, while their father wasn't looking, the boys ran away and lived on their own in the slums. The brother always gave his sister more food, but he himself remained hungry. But everything had its limit. He fainted due to illness. And unfortunately, soon after fainting, he died. Life lost its meaning, and sitting on the side of the road, the girl waited for the embrace of death, but someone extended a hand to her. Large hands lifted her up without any effort as she tried to speak. She still remembers how much warmth and kindness was in them. Like wings, they embraced her. The one who picked her up was her owner, Josephine. She not only took her in, but also provided her with food, a clean bed, and allowed her to recover. When her vision began to clear and her voice to return, the girl burst into tears, hugging the woman. And then she began to help her around the house. Soon it grew into work in the tavern. Everyone who worked there had their own obligations. They did not ask the girl about anything and welcomed her very warmly. While the peaceful days flew by, the wound in the girl's heart slowly healed. At times, her mother taught her defensive techniques. At first, she did not understand why, but now she fully understands the meaning of her actions. Children are often kidnapped, sold, and used as toys for the nobility, and her mother has already saved her twice. Coming to her brother's grave, the girl told him about her new life and work, and it seemed that he, too, was overwhelmed with feelings. Then she learned that her father had passed away. In the tavern, she met the very man with whom she was going to connect her life. It was Keigo. Now the guy was sitting and thinking about the fact that Yurina mentioned that she liked the red gerbera flowers blooming in the roadside dirt. And this is certainly not an elegant flower. Because of its resilience, the flower gives her strength. The girl told him about her past, and since she was able to open up to him, it means she trusts him. The guy even thought that perhaps she thought he didn't notice, But since they started living together, the girl became less shy about showing her tattoos, and he was very surprised not by the number of tattoos, because it seemed to be the fashion of this world, but by how easily Yurina undressed. For the first time in his life, the guy felt pure love for someone. He was ready to bet that he would never again meet such a wonderful person as Yurina. One day they were attacked by a giant sea urchin, but the boys together dealt with it very easily. Then they prepared dinner, they divided the responsibilities between themselves, and lived in peace. They cooked delicious food together. And then they went to bed. Sometimes Yurina fell asleep not on the bed, so Keigo took care of her and moved her. He could go to bed himself, but that would not be entirely right because he was no longer alone. When he first visited her place of work, the girl was different from the rest of the staff. Although she gave a sense of calm, she herself preferred to stay away from men, and her tattoos only hid her mental scars. Despite all the problems, she could still smile and be happy because she was surrounded by amazing people. All the girls in that place carry their own past, but they get along with each other because their mother saved them. When her friends asked Yurin if she would be lonely, she replied that on the contrary, she was happy to go on a trip. This place is her real home, so one day he would like to take her back there. And if she were a person without a single flaw, he is sure that he would never have fallen in love with her so much. She did everything in her power to survive in the harsh and lonely conditions, just like Gerbera. That's probably why he fell in love with her. He decided to express his apologies and sincere feelings in the form of a letter. And when the girl wakes up tomorrow, he will show her how much he loves her. The next morning, but the girl seemed offended. The guy wished her good morning, and everything immediately passed. It turned out that he did not confess his love to her last night. It completely slipped his mind. That's why the girl was unhappy. He gave her a letter and asked her to read it. She read his letter over and over again, like the picture book he gave her. Even though they were close, it was as if he had exchanged a letter with a girl from another country. They had confessed their love to each other again. Keigo was in love with her every